Imagine. You open your eyes, and the air around you is warm with the scent of salt and sun. Before you stretches an island ringed by turquoise waters and crowned with palaces of red columns and white walls. Frescoes shimmer with dancers and dolphins. No fortress walls, no armies. Only beauty, rhythm, and peace. You think this must be a myth, a paradise from a dream. But it was real. This was Crete, home of the Minoans, a civilization so advanced, so radiant, that some believe it was the lost Atlantis itself. Listen. The sea breathes against the shore. Waves slide over pebbles that glitter like shards of old glass, the remnants of a world long vanished. Beneath your feet, the earth hides stories, whole cities buried in ash and time. If you crouch down and touch the dust, you might still feel the pulse of something ancient humming beneath it. The Minoans lived here more than 3,500 years ago, yet their presence lingers like perfume on the wind. Their world was one of balance and brilliance, and then, almost overnight, it was gone. How does a civilization disappear? That question has haunted archaeologists, poets, and dreamers for centuries. Perhaps that's why Crete feels so charged, because every ruined corridor, every broken fresco, every clay tablet still hums with mystery. Let's walk together, you and I, along this sunlit shore and back through time. The waves will be our clock, each one pulling us deeper into the past, to an age when art and nature danced as one, and the gods of the sea ruled every breath. The year is roughly 2000 BC. Egypt's pyramids already stand to the south, gleaming beneath the desert sun. In Mesopotamia, scribes press cuneiform into wet clay. But here, in the heart of the Aegean, another kind of miracle unfolds, quieter, more graceful, more human. On Crete, the people we now call the Minoans begin to rise. Their island is their fortress, their stage, and their muse. Everything revolves around the sea. Look at the coastline, those deep harbors, the gentle bays. The sea isn't a barrier, it's a highway. Ships slide across it like silver fish, their sails catching the same wind that moves through olive branches inland. From the very start, the Minoans are traders, their hearts tuned to the rhythm of waves. Copper from Cyprus, ivory from Egypt, tin from Anatolia. They bring it all here, to Crete, where artisans carve, weave, and paint until raw material becomes magic. You can almost hear it, the creak of wooden hulls in the harbor, the calls of sailors in a dozen languages, the smell of olive oil and beeswax, the flutter of linen robes in the heat. Civilization isn't born with war here, it's born with trade, with curiosity, with the hum of creation. And yet, even this early, there's something strange about Crete. Something unlike the kingdoms around it. No walls. No armies. No monuments to conquest. Instead, its people build open palaces, sprawling, complex labyrinths of corridors and courtyards, filled not with soldiers but with art. The heart of it all is Knossos. Picture it. A palace that isn't a fortress, but a living organism. Hundreds of rooms linked by staircases and terraces, light wells and painted columns that glow red against the white plaster. The air smells faintly of saffron, of wine, of freshly plastered walls drying under the sun. Servants move silently through cool passageways carrying amphorae of oil and baskets of figs. Musicians tune lyres in shaded courtyards. Somewhere, a child's laughter echoes off the walls. This is not a world built on fear. It's a world built on rhythm. Knossos rises like a poem, fluid, colorful, endlessly turning in upon itself. The Minoans master architecture the way others master battle. They build with light, open rooms to catch the sun, terraces to welcome the breeze. They shape water to their will, channeling it through hidden pipes. Yes, they have plumbing, running water and drains centuries before the Greeks or Romans would dream of it. Their world hums with quiet sophistication. Everywhere you look, art blooms. On the walls, frescoes of dolphins leaping through sapphire seas. girls in flounced skirts dancing with bare arms raised. Young men vaulting over bulls in feats of daring grace. There's movement in every brushstroke, life in every curve. You realize something astonishing. This art isn't about war, or conquest, or kings. It's about celebration, of life, of color, of joy. Who paints like this unless they feel safe? And yet, that safety hides a deeper mystery. Who were these people, truly? We call them Minoans, after Minos, the mythical king of Crete said to have ruled a labyrinth and kept a monster beneath his palace. But that name is a gift of modernity, given by the man who uncovered these ruins thousands of years later, Sir Arthur Evans. The Minoans themselves left no name we can read. Their script, Linear A, remains undeciphered. Their own voices are sealed inside small clay tablets like messages in bottles cast into time's vast ocean. But their silence speaks in other ways. Look closer. Notice the symmetry of their rooms, the way light filters down into the heart of the palace as if by design. Notice how their temples blend with nature, not dominate it. The Minoans worship the earth and the sea, the mountains and the creatures that lived within them. Their gods were not distant beings but living forces, storms, serpents, bulls. Life itself was sacred. To the Minoans, the world was a cycle, creation, destruction, renewal. And maybe that's why everything they built feels alive, even in ruin. You can feel the pulse beneath your feet. The sun begins to sink, painting the sea in bronze. The air cools. You walk through what was once the central courtyard of Knossos, where festivals unfolded beneath the open sky. Imagine it alive, the stamp of feet on stone, the music of pipes and drums, the shimmer of gold jewelry catching firelight. People move in a spiral dance, men and women, nobles and servants, circling together. There is no rigid hierarchy here. Their art suggests equality, even reverence for women. Priestesses preside over rituals, their arms raised to the heavens. Snakes coil around their wrists, symbols of rebirth and divine power. This was a culture where women stood beside gods, not behind men. A civilization that seemed, impossibly, to find harmony where others found domination. And that harmony extended to their world itself. The Minoans built their cities in alignment with the landscape, always with an eye to balance. Palaces face the rising sun. Shrines cling to mountain peaks or nestle in caves. They understood, long before modern science, that the earth itself breathes. But harmony is fragile. And paradise, as history reminds us, never lasts. When the night falls over Crete, the sea whispers differently. The same waves that carried trade and prosperity can also bring storms. The same earth that nurtures life can tremble without warning. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps beyond the horizon, the island of Thera, what we now call Santorini, sleeps under a restless volcano. For now, the Minoans dance, unaware of what's coming. Their lamps flicker in the courtyards. Their frescoes gleam in the moonlight. The sea keeps its secrets. But if you listen closely, the wind through the ruins seems to murmur, not in words, but in warnings. Civilizations, like waves, rise and fall. And when they fall, they leave echoes, echoes that refuse to fade. So we stand here, in the ruins of Knossos, surrounded by broken columns and dust, and we wonder. How could such beauty vanish? How could an age of peace dissolve into legend? Maybe that's the mystery that keeps the Minoans alive, not their fall, but their brilliance. Because the light they lit on this island still glows across time, shimmering just beneath the surface of the modern world. You can see it in the myths of Greece, in the art of later empires, even in the word Europe itself, which, legend says, was the name of a Phoenician princess carried across the sea to Crete by a bull. Zeus, yes, but also a memory of this place, this culture that once called the sea its home. As the stars rise over the Aegean, the palace seems to breathe again. The columns glow red like embers. The waves hush against the shore. And somewhere, in the silence between heartbeats, you can almost hear them, the Minoans, laughing, singing, dancing still. The mystery has never faded. And perhaps, it never will. Night lingers gently over the Aegean. The stars above Crete flicker like embers on black silk, and the ruins of Knossos are silent again. You stand for a while, letting your eyes adjust to the dark, the air soft, heavy with salt and thyme, as though the island itself is breathing beside you. The waves below whisper against the rocks. They have been whispering the same rhythm for thousands of years. And if you listen long enough, that rhythm begins to sound like a heartbeat. Not just of the sea, but of something older, the slow, patient pulse of civilization itself, waiting to be born. When morning comes, you'll see it, the cradle of Europe. But for now, under starlight, imagine it first as the Minoans once did, as a gift of the sea, a world that needed no armies to defend it, and no walls to contain it. The first light of dawn arrives like a sigh, pale gold spreading over the peaks of Mount Ida, sliding down through olive groves and over the valley of Knossos. It glances off the sea and turns the whole horizon to liquid fire. In that light, Crete feels like a promise. Here is a place set between continents, kissed by every wind, Europe's southernmost island, nearer to Africa than to Athens, yet forever belonging to both. From the east comes the scent of Asia, spices, cedar, lapis blue as the heavens. From the west, the faint breath of the Ionian world yet to come. To the north lies Greece unborn, still dreaming in myths. To the south, Egypt already ancient, already wise. Crete listens to them all. And from their mingled whispers, it begins to dream its own civilization. Imagine the first people who sailed here, long before palaces or frescoes, long before anyone knew the name Minos. They came in small boats carved from cypress and pine, sails patched from goat hide, guided only by the stars. The sea was dangerous, but so was staying still. They carried seeds, tools, and the unspoken belief that life could always begin again somewhere new. When they found this island, fertile, green, sun-washed, they must have thought they'd reached the edge of the world. Crete is an island built of contrasts, sharp mountains cutting into the sky and valleys so lush they hum with bees. Even now, it feels like a place meant for beginnings. The earth smells sweet and mineral. Water spills from springs that never seem to run dry. The air trembles with heat by noon and softens again at dusk. From these gifts, the soil, the stone, the sea, the first Minoans built their world. They terraced the hillsides to plant barley and wheat. They learned to press olives into oil so clear it caught the light like amber. They tamed wild vines, coaxing grapes into wine. Goats and sheep grazed in the high pastures, pigs rooted near the villages. They were not warriors, not yet even merchants. They were caretakers of balance, a people who saw in nature both their teacher and their mirror. Their homes were simple at first, mud brick and timber, nestled into hillsides where wind and sun could pass freely. But there was already a sense of grace in their design, courtyards open to the sky, walls painted in soft colors, hearths surrounded by patterns that echoed the sea. They built with the rhythm of the land, never against it. Archaeologists later found traces of these earliest settlements, tiny figurines of goddesses, smooth clay pots etched with spirals, the earliest hints of a culture obsessed not with war or rule, but with beauty. Even in their infancy, the Minoans seemed to have believed that beauty was a form of truth. And then came the sea, always the sea. The Minoans were born of it. Their harbors curled like shells into the coast, their ships glided like living creatures across the water. They built long, narrow vessels, agile, balanced, swift, and filled them with olive oil, wool, and pottery painted with waves and flowers. They sailed east to Egypt, north to the Greek mainland, west to the islands. Wherever they went, they traded goods, yes, but also ideas. From Egypt came symbols of eternity, the ankh, the lotus. From Mesopotamia came the art of sealing clay with carved stones. From the Levant came copper and myths of storm gods. And Crete, ever hungry for beauty, transformed each of these into something new. What began as trade became exchange, and what began as exchange became connection. For the first time in history, cultures touched across the water, each reshaping the other like waves polishing stone. Crete became their meeting place, the hinge of the ancient world. The Minoans learned from all who came, but they also taught. Their pottery and jewelry began to appear far beyond their shores, prized for its elegance. Their symbols, spirals, horns, double axes, began to travel too, etched into the memory of civilizations that would come long after they were gone. Even now, when you walk the beaches of Crete and pick up a shard of painted pottery from the sand, you are touching that network of forgotten hands, the first threads of a world becoming one. Walk inland with me. The light is higher now, the fields awake. Farmers bend among rows of barley. The air is thick with the hum of bees and the smell of thyme crushed beneath sandals. Every so often, you hear the faint clink of pottery from a house, the bray of a distant donkey, the laughter of children chasing each other through dust that glows gold in the sun. This is what civilization looks like before it calls itself one. It isn't marble or empire. It's the quiet agreement between people and land, that if you care for the earth, it will care for you. The Minoans built shrines in caves, where water dripped like the heartbeat of the island itself. They raised small altars on hilltops, not to conquer the gods but to speak with them. The sacred was everywhere, in the snake that guarded the granary, in the olive tree that bent with fruit, in the sudden tremor of the earth when the god below stirred in his sleep. They didn't divide the world between holy and human. It was one and the same, a single, breathing organism. That belief shaped everything they made. Their art doesn't show armies or kings. It shows dancers, dolphins, lilies, and spirals, the endless cycle of life turning inward and outward. Theirs was a culture that saw the divine not in power, but in pattern. Centuries passed, and the island's villages grew into towns. Trade routes thickened like veins. Wealth flowed not from conquest, but from creation. And then, somewhere around 2000 BC, something extraordinary happened. The Minoans began to build palaces. Not fortresses. Not monuments to kings, but living cities designed around light and movement. At Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros, stone rose in graceful symmetry. Corridors twisted like the labyrinths of myth. Stairways climbed and turned, guiding sunlight deep into the heart of each palace. Courtyards opened to the sky. The walls were covered with color, reds, blues, and golds that seemed to pulse with the life they depicted. These weren't merely royal homes. They were the centers of administration, religion, art, and ritual. Places where the sacred and the civic met under one roof. A kingdom without a king, an empire without armies. The sea was their wall, the gods their guardians. For nearly 5 centuries, peace reigned here. Across the Mediterranean, kingdoms rose and fell, but Crete thrived, untouched. Its ships ruled the waves, its artisans perfected elegance, its farmers coaxed abundance from the soil. Visitors must have seen it as a kind of miracle, a world where life and art were indistinguishable. If you walk through the ruins of Knossos now, you can still feel the rhythm of that world. You can almost hear the echo of feet on polished stone, the soft murmur of voices, the distant cry of gulls over the harbor. The Minoans left no written records we can yet read. Their language, linear, still defies us, but their stones speak clearly enough. They tell us that civilization doesn't need cruelty to survive. It can grow from curiosity, from trust, from joy. Crete was the first great experiment in that belief, and for a time, it succeeded. Perhaps that's why the island feels different even now. There's a softness in its air, a strange timelessness in its light. You can sit among the ruins for hours and feel not sorrow, but serenity, as though the people who built this place understood something we've forgotten, that peace is not the absence of struggle, but the art of balance. Look toward the horizon. The sun has begun to dip again, staining the sea in molten color. The same sun the Minoans watched rise and set, the same sea that cradled their ships and their dreams. You can almost see one now, a long, lean vessel, its sail a pale triangle against the darkening sky. It glides toward the harbor, carrying amphorae filled with oil, jars painted with dolphins and lilies, gifts for trade. As it draws near, you can hear the laughter of the crew, the bark of dogs along the shore, the rhythm of hammers as dockworkers repair the next ship for voyage. Civilization in motion. Life continuing. Crete breathes in the scent of salt and grain and oil, and exhales it again into the world. The light fades. Shadows stretch across the hills. Somewhere inland, the first stars begin to show. You walk along the edge of the sea, the water lapping gently at your ankles. Behind you, the mountains rise dark and solemn. Ahead, the waves stretch endlessly east, toward the lands that once called Crete their neighbor, their teacher, their rival. And as you walk, you begin to understand why they called this island the cradle of civilization. Because here, humanity learned its gentler arts, the art of trade instead of war, the art of building in harmony instead of dominance, the art of seeing beauty not as decoration but as devotion. In Crete, civilization did not rise like a conqueror. It unfolded like a flower. You stop at last where the shore curves inward, and the moon climbs over the sea. The waves shimmer silver now, and the air is cool against your face. Behind you, faintly, the ruins of Knossos glimmer under starlight, bones of a world that once danced. You close your eyes and listen. The sea breathes steady and calm. Somewhere far below, the earth murmurs, the deep volcanic heart that both gave life and, one day, will take it away. But for now, in this moment suspended between past and myth, Crete is eternal. The cradle still rocks, and the song of its first civilization still lulls the Mediterranean night. And slowly, without pause or boundary, the story carries you onward, toward the palaces without walls, where the heart of this radiant world still beats in stone and color beneath the Cretan sun. The last light of day softens, turning the white stones of Knossos to rose. A hush settles over the island, the kind that feels less like silence and more like breath held between worlds. The sea hums somewhere below the cliffs, steady and eternal. The smell of olive wood smoke drifts through the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of crushed herbs beneath your sandals. As the stars begin to shimmer above, the ruins glow faintly, like embers remembering fire. You walk among them slowly, your hand brushing the smooth curve of a column, the cool plaster of a half-buried wall. The columns taper downward, wider at the top, slender at the base, a design unlike anything else in the ancient world. They feel alive, as though they were meant to grow, not to bear weight. You pause. Imagine what this place once was, not a ruin, but a living heart. A city of light, open to the sky. This was Knossos, the palace without walls. When dawn returned, it must have been dazzling. The entire complex, hundreds of rooms, corridors, staircases, and terraces, blazed in the morning sun. Red and white columns reflected gold through open courtyards. The air shimmered with heat, the scent of flowers and salt drifting together. Every surface gleamed with paint, ochre, vermilion, cobalt, colors that still cling faintly to the stones after 3,000 years. Step closer in your mind. The palace wasn't a fortress, nor a temple alone. It was both, and more. A living labyrinth, a heartbeat of civilization. Every level connected to the next, every door leading not to confinement, but to movement. There were no high battlements here, no towers bristling with archers. The Minoans trusted the sea to protect them. They needed no walls because they feared no enemies. That freedom shaped everything they built. In Egypt, palaces rose like monuments to power. In Mesopotamia, they were fortresses of order. But in Crete, architecture was an act of grace, an attempt to mirror the natural world. The Minoans built as the sea breathes, open, fluid, full of light. You descend a staircase that spirals like a conch shell. The light wells are deep, designed to draw the sun down into the heart of the palace. The air is cool here, a miracle of design in a world without machines. Water once flowed through clay pipes along the floors, bringing fresh springs from the hills into private chambers. There were drains, flush systems, baths, plumbing, centuries before Rome. Listen closely, water was sacred to them. It was the blood of the earth, the laughter of the gods. Every drop that flowed through this place was both practical and spiritual, turning architecture into ritual. In the central courtyard, the heart of Knossos, imagine the sound of life. The stamping of feet in dance. The rhythm of drums. The sharp breath of a bull about to charge. It was here, according to frescoes, that the famous bull leaping took place, the ritual that came to define the Minoans. Young men and women, dressed alike in bright girdles and short skirts, would face a bull head-on. As it charged, they would seize its horns, vault over its back in a graceful arc, and land behind it, not killing the animal, but mastering its strength. To us it seems impossible, reckless, perhaps even suicidal. But to the Minoans it was something else entirely, a dance between human and divine, an act of faith that celebrated balance, courage, and beauty. In their art, the bull is everywhere, in frescoes, on seals, carved into stone. Not as a monster, but as a symbol of life's raw energy, something to honor, not to destroy. You can feel that energy still, even among these quiet stones. The ground beneath your feet hums faintly, as if remembering the pounding hooves and music. Knossos was more than a palace. It was a theater, a temple, a city, and a myth woven into one. Let your gaze wander now beyond Knossos, to Phaistos in the south, Melia to the east, Sacros by the sea. Each of them mirrors the same idea, openness. No walls. No citadels. Just terraces and courtyards, long stairways that climb toward the light. Walk through the ruins of Phaistos and you'll find wide paved courtyards lined with storehouses, their floors still scored with marks where heavy jars, pitoi, once stood in rows. Those jars held the island's wealth, olive oil, wine, honey, grain. The Minoans didn't store gold. They stored life. Step further into the administrative rooms, small, windowed, full of tablets baked in ancient fire. The writing pressed into them, linear, remains a mystery. But you can still feel the order it represents. Every line, every symbol, the quiet hum of bureaucracy. Civilization begins not only with kings, but with records. And here, they wrote everything down, shipments of grain, offerings to gods, lists of workers. Imagine the hands that shaped those tablets, slender fingers pressing a stylus into wet clay, the smell of earth and smoke mingling as it dried. The voices behind the writing are gone, but the rhythm remains. The rhythm of a society so organized, so confident, it needed no walls to define itself. And then there were the frescoes. Oh, the colors! Even faded by time, they pulse with life. The blue of the Aegean caught forever on plaster. The white of skin dusted with gypsum. The crimson of robes, the gold of jewelry, the black curls of hair painted in looping strokes. The Minoan world was one of movement, dolphins twisting through water, women carrying lilies, men running, leaping, diving. Everything flows. No stiff hierarchies, no solemn postures of kings and gods like those carved in Egyptian stone. Here, divinity danced. You pause before a fragment of wall painting, a young woman with her profile turned toward the sea. Her eyes are dark, serene. Her lips curve, not in worship or fear, but in something startlingly human, joy. She is known to archaeologists as La Parisienne, the Lady of Knossos. Her image has become a symbol of Minoan elegance, confident, sensual, free. In her smile lies the essence of this place. To live here was to live surrounded by beauty, but not trapped by it. Their art wasn't a luxury. It was language, a way to speak to the gods, to each other, to time itself. You wandered deeper into the ruins, the air cool and faintly sweet with the smell of time and dust. The corridor opens into a small chamber with traces of blue and gold paint clinging to the walls. This, perhaps, was the throne room. The so-called seat of King Minos, though no true throne in the royal sense. The chair itself is simple, carved from stone, the back curved like a wave. Opposite it, a basin once held water, for purification, or perhaps for reflection. The walls shimmered with paintings of griffins, their wings spread as if to guard whoever sat here. But the space is intimate, almost human in scale. No grandeur, no intimidation. You can imagine a priestess here, rather than a king, a woman cloaked in white linen, the scent of frankincense thick in the air. She might raise her hands to the ceiling as sunlight filters through a narrow vent above, her voice echoing softly as she calls to the unseen powers that dwell in earth and air. The Minoans seem to have lived without fear, even of their gods. Their faith was woven into daily life, not separated from it. The sacred and the ordinary shared the same floor, the same light, the same breeze. Step outside again, into the open courtyard. The air tastes of salt. The horizon burns gold with late afternoon light. You can see the glint of the sea from here, the same sea that brought them wealth and wonder, that carried their stories outward like seeds on the wind. From this vantage point, the island seems endless, hills rolling into valleys, valleys into shore. Smoke rises from distant villages. Somewhere, shepherds call to their flocks. The sound of bells drifts faintly across the air. The palaces lie at the heart of it all, not as fortresses, but as suns around which daily life revolved. Everything radiated outward from them: faith, art, trade, music, love. And when the evening came, and the lamps were lit in every window, Crete must have glowed like a constellation set upon the earth. You sit for a moment on a fallen stone, watching the shadows lengthen. The columns, red as blood and curved like tree trunks, seem to change with the light. The frescoes catch a hint of the last sun, the blues deepening, the red softening to rose. You realize that what the Minoans built was not meant to endure like the pyramids, or the ziggurats. It was meant to breathe, to live, to move, to age like skin. And in a way, it still does. Every wind that sighs through Knossos carries their memory. Every beam of sunlight that slides across these stones repeats their design. They built their world as if eternity were not a monument but a moment, something to be lived beautifully, even if only once. As the sun sinks into the Aegean, you rise and begin to walk back toward the sea. The ruins fade behind you into shadow, their edges softened by twilight. The air grows cooler, the cicadas start their song again. The world smells of salt and myrtle, of endings and beginnings. The path leads downhill toward a small cove. The water glows faintly in the dying light, gold at the edges, indigo at the heart. You stand there for a long time, listening to the whisper of waves. The palaces are gone now, their walls crumbled to dust. But their spirit remains, not in stone, but in rhythm, in color, in the idea that beauty can be a form of strength. You close your eyes. The sea breathes. The wind shifts. And for a moment, it feels as if you are back there, inside the living labyrinth, surrounded by dancers and drums, the scent of oil lamps and flowers thick in the night. The palaces without walls still stand, somewhere between memory and myth. And their doors, wide open to the sky, are waiting for us still. The moon hangs low above the Aegean, a pale coin floating over a world made of silver and shadow. You walk slowly along the curve of the shore, your footsteps sinking into cool sand, the sound of waves a heartbeat beneath the quiet. Behind you, the mountains loom dark and watchful. Ahead, the faint lights of Knossos flicker like embers clinging to the night. The air smells of salt and olive oil, of warm stone and distant fires. It is the scent of life, old, patient, eternal. You pause and listen, and somewhere in the stillness you imagine the faint rhythm of drums, the low hum of pipes, the laughter of people long vanished. The Minoans are gathering again, not in war or worship, but in joy. And so we step into their world, the world of the art of life. Morning breaks not with a roar, but with music. The first light spills down the mountain slopes like honey, slipping into courtyards and through narrow streets. The city stirs. Doors open onto terraces draped with grapevines. Children chase each other along stone alleys, their feet slapping the dust, their laughter echoing between walls painted with color. Knossos is alive. Everywhere you look, there is movement. A potter turns his wheel in a small shaded room, shaping clay into jars that gleam with moisture. His hands, rough from years of work, move with a rhythm that seems older than thought. Squeeze, lift, turn, release. Each vessel is a poem of curves. Outside, in the courtyard, women wash wool in great clay basins, their bracelets chiming softly as they work. Sunlight flashes on copper hairpins, on the ripple of fabric as it's laid out to dry. Further down the street, a scribe bends over a tablet of wet clay. The stylus presses carefully, lines and symbols, a language we cannot yet read. To him, it is the pulse of order. To us, it is a locked song. But even without the words, you can feel the grace in the motion, the quiet devotion to detail. For the Minoans, life itself was art. Not a distraction from survival, but the expression of it. Walk through the markets. The air hums with scent and sound, roasted grain, honey cakes, the sharp tang of sea salt and cured fish. Bronze gleams from the stalls, knives, mirrors, jewelry, tools. Pottery glows in stacks, red and black and cream, the spirals painted on them curling like the tides. No one shouts. No chaos. The market hums like a hive, purposeful, balanced, alive. In the corner, a group of girls laugh as they arrange garlands of lilies and crocus. Their fingers are stained yellow with saffron, the golden dust that will scent the temple and color the robes of dancers. Saffron, more precious than gold, gathered from the fields in the mountains when the air turns cool. The petals are tiny, fragile, but their color endures for centuries. Even now, in the ruins of Acroterion nearby Thera, frescoes still show those same girls bending over the flowers, their hair tied with ribbons, their movements serene and proud. In this world, even labor becomes ritual, and beauty a form of worship. The frescoes tell us more than any words could. Come closer. Imagine the painter standing before a new wall, the plaster still damp, the air sharp with lime. He grinds pigments from minerals, hematite for red, malachite for green, azurite for blue. Each stroke must be perfect. The paint sinks into the wet surface, fusing forever with the wall. There is no room for correction. The painter's hand moves swiftly, fluidly, confident as a dancer's. And what he paints, oh, what he paints! Look, dolphins swimming through waves that curve like music. Women with flounced skirts and curling hair, standing among lilies. Boys leaping over bulls with effortless grace. Griffins and monkeys, birds and spirals, life layered upon life. There are no kings here. No battles. No suffering. The world on these walls is bright and free, filled with motion and laughter. Perhaps that is the greatest revelation of the Minoans, that a civilization can exist whose art celebrates joy instead of power. When you gaze at these frescoes, you are seeing the first flowering of what would later become the spirit of Greece, that faith in beauty, proportion, and the dignity of the human body. But here, it is still innocent, still close to the soil and sea. They did not paint gods towering above men. They painted men and women moving with the divine, dancing, leaping, offering, laughing. To live beautifully was the highest devotion. And beauty was not confined to walls. It was worn, held, tasted, heard. Minoan women dressed in rich colors, blues and golds, whites and saffron yellows. Their bodices opened over the chest, framed with embroidery, their skirts flared in tiers, moving like waves when they walked. Men wore linen kilts or loincloths, their skin bronzed by the sun, their hair bound with ribbons. Jewelry shimmered everywhere, gold, lapis, amber, seashells polished smooth. Artisans crafted them with exquisite precision, using tools so fine that even today we struggle to replicate their detail. Gold bees clutching a drop of honey, snakes winding through bracelets, leaves so thin they tremble in the breeze. To adorn oneself was not vanity. It was celebration. A reminder that life, brief, fragile, radiant, deserved to be honored in every moment. Even their pottery was alive with design. Spirals, shells, vines, and fish flowed across its surface as though the clay remembered the sea it came from. Every vessel, from the smallest cup to the grandest storage jar, seemed to say, "See how the world moves. See how we move with it." The Minoans loved music. We know it from the instruments unearthed: lyres carved of tortoiseshell, flutes of bone, drums of stretched hide. And though we cannot hear their melodies, we can imagine them. Picture a festival night. The courtyard at Knossos glows with torchlight. The air is thick with the scent of wine and roasted lamb. Men and women gather, their faces flushed with excitement. The musicians begin. The soft pulse of drums, the low hum of pipes, the twang of strings. Then come the dancers. Barefoot, graceful, their steps quick and sure. They circle the courtyard, weaving in patterns that mirror the stars. The women's skirts flare, the men leap high, hands reaching toward the sky. The movement becomes prayer, not to plead, but to give thanks. You can feel the rhythm even now, echoing faintly through the stones. This is how the Minoans worshipped, through dance, through music, through life itself. For them, art was not separate from religion. It was religion. To create, to move, to adorn, these were acts of communion with the divine. Their architecture, too, reflects this philosophy. Walk again through Knossos or Phaistos, and you'll notice how everything flows. Rooms open onto terraces. Corridors curve instead of cut. Windows frame the sky, not the street. The palaces were not meant to dominate the landscape, but to merge with it. Light wells pull the sun deep into the heart of the buildings. Ventilation shafts whisper with wind. Water channels run beneath the floors, cool and constant. Even in the height of summer, the air remains soft and alive. Imagine living in such a space, where every wall is painted with motion, every room flooded with air and light. You'd wake each morning to the sound of birds and the smell of herbs from the courtyard, the blue of the sea glinting beyond the hills. Civilization here was not a cage but a garden. The Minoans seemed to understand that beauty could sustain the spirit as much as bread sustained the body. Their art was nourishment, for themselves, for their gods, and perhaps for us too, centuries later. And what of love? Their frescoes suggest a world where men and women shared more equally than most ancient societies allowed. The presence of women in positions of reverence, as priestesses, dancers, and central figures in art, tells us that power, at least spiritual power, was often feminine. In their myths, later remembered by the Greeks, Crete would be home to powerful women, Pasiphae, Ariadne, the snake goddess. Perhaps these are echoes of real priestesses, of women whose grace and authority defined the island's rhythm. The Minoans seem to have seen no contradiction between strength and beauty, between the sacred and the sensual. To love, to create, to celebrate, these were not sins or excesses, but affirmations of the divine order. They lived in color. They loved in color. And their art never forgot it. As the day fades, the shadows stretch long again across the courtyards. The last rays of sunlight strike the columns, turning them crimson, then gold, then soft gray. The sea beyond the hills catches the same light, until sky and water become one luminous mirror. The people begin to drift home. The market quiets. The drums fall silent. A few lamps glow in upper rooms, their light trembling through open shutters. Somewhere, a mother hums a lullaby to her child, a melody lost to time, but still drifting faintly in the evening air. You stand once more in the heart of Knossos, where the walls breathe warmth even as darkness gathers. Every surface still holds a trace of the hands that shaped it, the eyes that looked upon it, the hearts that believed in beauty as the highest truth. The wind comes first, soft, restless, tasting faintly of rain. It threads through the olive trees, sighs against the columns, stirs the dust on the ancient stones. Then a drop. Another. The air thickens with the scent of wet earth and the salt of the sea. You stand among the ruins as the first rainfall of evening patters gently through the courtyards of Knossos. It's easy to imagine the same rain falling thousands of years ago, dripping from the eaves, darkening the red plaster, gathering in rivulets along the tiled floors. Somewhere, a potter would have run to move his clay. A scribe would have reached to shield his work from the drops. For the Minoans, even rain was a messenger. Every sound, every shift in the air carried meaning. And they were a people who understood the power of meaning, so much that they tried to capture it in symbols, to fix the invisible in the permanence of clay. So now we follow them into one of their most profound mysteries. Their words. The storm passes quickly, as most do here. By dawn, the air is washed clean, and sunlight slides down the hills like melted gold. The stones still glisten with dew, the air sweet and cool. You walk toward a small side chamber, quiet, shaded, unremarkable at first glance. But here, in this little room, a miracle once took place, the birth of writing on European soil. Imagine it. A man, or perhaps a woman, sits before a small table of polished wood. The room is cool, the light soft. On the table rests a flat lump of clay, still damp and smelling of earth. In one hand, the writer holds a stylus, a sharpened reed or piece of bone. With slow precision, they press it into the clay, marking symbols in neat lines. Some look like fish, others like branches, waves, stars. Outside, life goes on, laughter from the courtyard, the sound of goats in the distance, the rhythm of sandals on stone. But here, in this quiet space, the world narrows to the soft scratch of stylus against clay. Each mark is a thought-given shape, a moment made eternal. This is Linear A, the Minoans' written language, the oldest in Europe, and still unread. Scholars call it linear because of its form, precise, straight lines carved into clay. But the Minoans had another, earlier script too, Cretan hieroglyphic, more pictorial, full of eyes and birds and curling forms. Both flourished side by side for a time, perhaps serving different purposes, one for the sacred, the other for the practical. And then, somewhere around 1800 BC, Linear A took hold. It was a language built not for poetry, but for order, tallies of grain, records of oil and wine, offerings to gods, lists of craftsmen. To us, they read like accounting. To them, perhaps, like liturgy. Because for the Minoans, the act of writing was never just commerce, it was communion. They didn't write on scrolls or parchment. They wrote on clay, the same material from which they shaped their gods, their jars, their homes. Words, to them, were part of the earth. And the earth, in return, preserved them. When the palaces burned, the fire hardened those tablets by accident, turning what would have crumbled into something everlasting. The flames that destroyed the Minoan world also ensured its survival, at least in fragments, whispering through time. You kneel and picture it, a basket filled with hundreds of small tablets, stacked like loaves of bread. Each one wet with the fingerprints of its maker. Each one a heartbeat in clay. When the flames came, the roof fell, the beams collapsed, the air turned to smoke. But the tablets, those silent, waiting words, baked themselves into eternity. Thousands of years later, they would be found buried beneath ash and rubble. Archaeologists lifted them gently from the ground, brushing away dust to reveal the marks. To hold one is to feel the tremor of that vanished world, the weight of a message never read. Linear A remains unbroken, its meaning sealed like a tomb. No Rosetta Stone. No bilingual clue. Just rows of symbols that resist every attempt to make them speak. Some look tantalizingly familiar, a triangle that might mean mountain, a wavy line that could be water. There are signs for numbers, for goods, for what might be names of gods. But together they refuse to yield. It is as though the Minoans left their thoughts deliberately veiled, not to taunt, but to protect. Perhaps they believed that words held power too great for anyone else to command. Or perhaps, like the sea they loved, their language was never meant to be fully contained. Still, we can guess at its rhythm. The later Mycenaeans, who inherited much from the Minoans, developed their own script, Linear B. It was deciphered in the 1950s, and revealed to record an early form of Greek. But its shapes, its structure, its bones all came from Linear A. This tells us something profound, that the Minoan language, though lost, lies at the root of so much that came after, of Greece, of Europe, of the very alphabet you are reading now. Their silence, paradoxically, is what gave birth to our voice. And perhaps that's fitting. Civilization does not begin with the word spoken. It begins with the word remembered. Walk deeper into the archives of Knossos, into rooms where the light slants low across the floors. You see rows of storage jars, shelves built into the walls, and here and there small tablets resting where they fell. Some bear imprints of string, evidence they were once tied into bundles. Others show faint fingerprints pressed into the edge, perhaps from the scribe himself. Can you imagine those hands? Strong from labor, yet delicate enough to carve tiny symbols into wet clay. Fingers dusted with earth, nails rimmed with red from the iron-rich soil. The writer pauses, wipes sweat from the brow, glances toward the open doorway where the sound of waves drifts in from afar. What did they think in that moment? Did they sense the weight of what they were doing, that these small marks would one day outlast even the memory of their names? Or were they simply following habit, another day's work beneath the sun? The mystery lies not only in what they wrote, but why. Outside, the city hums with the ordinary miracles of life. The baker pulling bread from the oven. The potter shaping a new jar. The priestess raising her hands in a morning offering. And somewhere, a scribe finishes his record and sets the clay tablet to dry in the shade. On it he has pressed a list of goods to be offered at the temple. 10 jars of oil, 6 of honey, 2 of wine. Beneath the list, perhaps, he has added a name, not his own, but the goddess's. A promise that the gift will reach her hands. You can almost see it, a quiet faith in permanence. The belief that what is written will endure, that words can carry intention across time. And in that belief lies the seed of something entirely new, the idea that memory can exist outside the mind, that thought can live beyond the thinker. The Minoans were not the first to write, but they were the first in Europe to give thought to clay, to say, this happened. We were here. That, in the end, is the heart of civilization, the refusal to vanish. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncovered the first of these tablets, the air in those ruined chambers must have trembled. Imagine Arthur Evans, brush in hand, crouched in the dust at Knossos. He picks up a small piece of clay, wipes it gently, and stares at the lines pressed across its surface. What language could this be? What voice, reaching from so deep in time? He gave it a name, Linear A, and thus gave form to the formless once again. But naming is not the same as knowing. Even Evans, who restored Knossos with his own romantic vision, could not break its silence. More than a century has passed since then, and still, no one can read it. Computers have tried. Linguists have compared every known script. And yet, the symbols remain like a melody half remembered, haunting, familiar, but forever just out of reach. It is one of history's most beautiful frustrations, that the first civilization of Europe speaks to us, yet we cannot answer. But maybe that's how it was meant to be. The Minoans left behind not an empire, but an echo, an invitation. Their language, sealed in clay, hums beneath the surface of our own. We see their art, their architecture, their grace, and we hear the whisper of something that cannot be translated. The poetry of life lived fully, the humility of people who trusted beauty more than conquest. Perhaps Linear A isn't meant to be read. Perhaps it's meant to be felt. Each symbol curves like a wave, rises like wind, falls like rain. Together they form a script that moves with the same rhythm as the island, fluid, cyclical, alive. When you look at those marks, you are not looking at mere words. You are looking at the shape of thought itself, an ancient music frozen mid-breath. The sun is high again now. The rain-washed air glitters with brightness. You step outside, leaving the cool chamber for the warmth of the courtyard. Around you, the walls glow, their faded frescoes gleaming softly in the light. You turn one last time toward the archives. Inside, the shadows still hold their silent shelves, their unread tablets. Somewhere in there lies a message meant for no one and everyone, a prayer, a record, a song, a goodbye. And though we may never hear its words, we can still feel its pulse. Because writing, at its heart, is a promise, that meaning can outlive mortality. The Minoans made that promise long ago, pressing their faith into clay, sealing it with fire and silence. And even now, their promise endures. Each mark a breath. Each symbol a heartbeat. Each unread word a whisper that says, "Remember us." The wind rises again, playful now, chasing sunlight across the hills. You follow it out toward the edge of the palace, where the view opens wide to the sea. The horizon shimmers, endless and blue, the same horizon their ships once crossed. Beneath your feet, the earth hums softly. Within it, thousands of those tablets still lie buried, waiting, patient, content to remain unread. And perhaps that is enough. Because even without their translation, the Minoans have already told us everything that matters. They taught us how to build with light, to dance with courage, to see the sacred in daily life. And through the mystery of their written word, they remind us that silence, too, can be eternal speech. The sea sighs, the air glows, and the story carries on. Into the next turn of the labyrinth, where women stand beside gods, and the pulse of power beats to a different rhythm. The sea is quiet again. The storm that brushed the island has passed, leaving the air washed clean, smelling of rain, salt, and the faint sweetness of crushed time. You stand near the edge of the palace, where the cliffs fall away to the shining Aegean. The waves below are calm now, slipping against the rocks in long, slow breaths. The light of morning spills gently across Knossos, catching on the red columns, on the fragments of fresco that still cling to plaster. The walls seem to glow from within, as though the sun remembers them. And in that glow, you begin to sense their presence, not kings, not conquerors, but women. Women who once moved through these same courtyards, their skirts whispering across the stone, their hair gleaming with gold rings and ribbons, their bracelets chiming as they passed. Women whose hands anointed altars with oil, who poured wine to the sea, who danced beneath the sun until the gods themselves must have paused to watch. The Minoans were different. Their art tells us so. In every other early civilization, men stood at the center, pharaohs, emperors, warriors. But here, the heart of the world was female. Walk with me through one of their frescoed halls. The air is cool, the shadows alive with color. On the walls, women fill the scene, priestesses with serpents in their hands, dancers leaping among lilies, attendants carrying trays of offerings. Their faces are calm, assured. Their bodies are strong. They are not decoration. They are authority. The Minoans built their society around balance, between sea and earth, life and death, male and female. Yet in that balance, the feminine spirit was the anchor. In the shrines, in the rituals, in the frescoes painted with such loving precision, we see it again and again, power expressed not through conquest, but through creation, leadership grounded not in fear, but in grace. The Lady of Snakes, the mistress of animals, the mountain mother, she wears many faces, but all are one. Her arms rise to the heavens, serpents winding around them like living threads of energy. Her skirt flares like the petals of a flower. Her eyes are wide and serene, meeting yours without hesitation. She is at once queen, priestess, goddess, and woman, the embodiment of the world's endless ability to renew itself. Imagine a morning ritual. The first light has just broken over the mountains, touching the peaks of Ida and Juctas with pale gold. The courtyards fill with people, farmers, sailors, merchants, children, all gathering to witness the rising of the sun, the awakening of the goddess. Drums begin, deep and slow. The sound moves through the palace like a heartbeat. Then the dancers appear, young women in flounced skirts, bare-shouldered, their skin shining with oil. Their movements are deliberate, circular, echoing the motion of stars, the pattern of waves. A priestess steps forward. She carries a bowl of milk and honey. Her hair is dark and heavy, her jewelry gleaming in the morning light. She kneels, pouring the offering onto the stone altar. The liquid pools and glistens. There are no words, only rhythm, the hum of drums, the rustle of cloth, the sigh of the sea below. And as the sun lifts over the horizon, the courtyard erupts in dance. The women move faster, skirts swirling, bracelets flashing. Their steps are strong and sure. Their faces are radiant with joy. This was not worship in the way we think of it, not fear of gods or pleading for mercy. It was celebration. It was gratitude for existence itself. The Minoans did not bow before divinity, they danced with it. In their society, that same reverence carried into daily life. Women are shown as merchants, artisans, priestesses, perhaps even rulers. In one fresco, a woman stands behind a throne, her hand raised in command. In another, she oversees a procession of attendants bearing gifts, jars of oil, pomegranates, flowers. Her posture is effortless, her gaze direct. Even the architecture of their palaces seems shaped around her presence. The throne room at Knossos, often imagined as the seat of a king, feels intimate, almost womb-like, its walls painted with griffins, creatures sacred to the goddess. The throne itself is small, its curve gentle, carved of pale stone that glows in candlelight. The space feels feminine, sacred, alive. Some scholars believe it was a woman, perhaps a high priestess, who sat there, mediating between the mortal and divine. She would not have ruled by decree, but by understanding, balancing the needs of people, land, and gods. Power here did not demand obedience. It invited harmony. Step out again into the sunlight. The marketplace hums with activity. Potters turn their wheels, traders weigh jars of oil, fishermen unload their catch. Among them walk women, not hidden behind veils, not confined to shadows. They move openly, confidently, their laughter rising over the noise of trade. A young girl kneels to tie a basket. Another haggles good-naturedly with a merchant. A mother balances a jar on her shoulder, the curve of it mirroring her own. Every gesture speaks of belonging, of equality woven so naturally into life that it needed no proclamation. And this equality found expression in art. Nowhere in Minoan frescoes do you see men towering over women, no scenes of subjugation or hierarchy. Instead, you find faces turned toward each other in conversation, in music, in dance. Their gazes meet as equals. The body, too, was not something to hide but to honor. The women in their art wear elaborate gowns that celebrate the body's movement, narrow waists, flowing skirts, open bodices revealing the curve of the chest. There is pride in these forms, not shame. They stand unafraid of the gaze, knowing themselves part of the same beauty they worshipped in the world around them. The goddess they revered was not distant. She was everywhere. In the fertile soil beneath the olives. In the trembling of the earth after rain. In the hum of bees, whose hives were symbols of community and renewal. Even the double axe, the labyrinth, that appears so often in their art was not a weapon of war, but a symbol of creation and balance. Twin blades, equal and opposite, meeting in the center. Through her, they learned the great lesson of nature, that creation requires destruction, that endings make way for beginnings. The snake, winding through her hands, embodied that truth. It shed its skin to be reborn, just as the moon waxed and waned, just as crops rose and fell, just as human lives passed and returned. The Minoans did not divide the sacred from the ordinary, nor the feminine from the divine. They understood that one was the reflection of the other. And perhaps that understanding was their strength. Because when you live in harmony with the world, you do not seek to dominate it, and in that gentleness lies endurance. For centuries, Crete thrived in peace while other lands were scarred by war. Ships came and went from its harbors. Palaces grew and flourished. Music echoed across courtyards. Children learned to read the sea and the sky as their ancestors had. The goddess watched over them all, in statues of stone, in paintings of color, in the pulse of every ritual and harvest. Her balance shaped everything. But nothing in nature is eternal. Even harmony must give way to change. As the light fades, you look once more at the hills beyond Knossos. Their slopes glow with the last gold of day. A breeze moves through the olive groves, whispering softly. You can almost hear the ancient songs in it, the hymns sung by women to the goddess, thanking her for fertility, for the sea's calm, for another season of life. And then, faintly, beneath that peace, another sound, the low rumble of the earth. Barely perceptible. The gods stirring in their sleep. But the priestesses would not have feared it. To them, the trembling ground was not wrath but reminder that the goddess was alive beneath their feet, dreaming her long, deep dreams. You stand for a moment longer, watching the first stars appear. The sea gleams silver. The ruins glow faintly in their light. Here, in this place, power was not a throne or a sword. It was a dance. A rhythm between woman and world, between creation and surrender. The Minoans understood that to hold power was not to grasp it, but to move with it, to live as the goddess lived, in endless renewal. The air cools. The sky deepens to violet. You turn toward the sound of waves, your footsteps echoing softly on the ancient stone. Behind you, the ghosts of the priestesses fade back into shadow, their jewels glinting once before they vanish, their voices merging with the wind. And ahead, carried on the sea breeze, comes a new sound, the heavy breath of bulls, the pounding of hooves, the beginning of a legend that will never die. The dance of women and gods is ending. The dance of man and beast is about to begin. The story moves on, unbroken, unstoppable, into the cult of the bull. Night deepens over Knossos. The lamps in the palace burn low, and the wind from the sea carries the smell of rain and myrtle through the open courts. The moon has risen high above the mountains, a silver eye, watching. You stand alone in the central courtyard, the same space that once pulsed with life, with music, with the laughter of dancers. Now it is quiet, but if you close your eyes, you can still hear the faint echo of drums, the low murmur of horns, the rhythmic stamping of feet on stone. The Minoans are gathering again, as they once did, to honor the most powerful creature in their world, the bull. By day, the bull was a symbol of the island's strength, of virility, of the sacred power of life itself. By night, it became something more, a bridge between the mortal and the divine, between what could be tamed and what could never be controlled. Everywhere in Minoan art, the bull appears, massive, magnificent, alive with motion. Its muscles ripple beneath painted skin. Its horns curve like crescents toward the sky. In frescoes, it charges, leaps, dances. It is both animal and god, chaos and creation. For the Minoans, the bull was not merely worshipped, it was experienced. Its spirit infused their festivals, their myths, even their architecture. The horns that crown the walls of Knossos, the great stone horns of consecration, are a constant reminder of that sacred presence. They framed the palace like a symbol of protection, or warning, or both. To live on Crete was to live under the watch of the bull. The origins of its worship are as old as the island itself. Before palaces rose, before frescoes and ships and trade, the bull had already rooted itself in the imagination of these people. Archaeologists have found clay figurines of bulls buried beneath early homes, as if placed there to bless or guard the household. Tiny double axes, labyrinths, appear alongside them, symbols of balance and sacrifice, always paired with the image of the bull's head. Over time, these images grew into rituals, and the rituals into myth. Imagine it, a festival day in spring, when the air is soft and filled with the scent of blooming crocus. The people gather in the great courtyard, their clothes bright, their faces shining with excitement. Drums begin, low and steady. From the far end of the palace, a massive bull is led forth, dark-coated, restless, the sunlight glancing off its hide. Its breath steams in the air. The crowd hushes. This is not a slaughter. It is a dance. The frescoes tell the story better than any words. They show lithe young men and women facing the bull as it charges, grasping its horns, vaulting into the air in a feat of impossible grace, bull leaping. It is a moment suspended between life and death, courage and surrender. The leaper trusts the rhythm of the bull's charge, the strength of their own timing, the will of the gods. Some leap clean over, landing behind the animal to the roar of the crowd. Others fall. The risk is part of the sanctity. The act is both performance and prayer, a physical conversation with the divine. To leap the bull was to touch power itself and live. It was the dance of creation made flesh. The Minoans painted it everywhere, in Knossos, in the villas of Phaistos, even on tiny gold rings used to seal their letters. Always the same image, the flying human body, the charging bull, the eternal moment of motion. To them, the bull was not an enemy to be conquered, but a partner in the sacred rhythm of existence. And yet there is something deeper here, something that stirs uneasily beneath the beauty. The bull's power is double-edged. It gives, but it also takes. It is a force that demands respect, even fear. The Minoans understood that life and death are inseparable, that every act of creation carries the shadow of destruction. Their rituals reflected that truth. During certain festivals, it is said, a bull might be sacrificed, its blood spilled upon the altar as an offering to the earth. The body would then be roasted and shared among the participants, the act transforming death into nourishment, chaos into order. It was not cruelty, it was acknowledgement. The gods give life, but they require its return. Even in their myths, this understanding took form. Later Greeks would tell the story of Minos, king of Crete, who failed to honor Poseidon by refusing to sacrifice a bull sent from the sea. In punishment, the goddess Persephone, Minos's wife, was filled with desire for the divine animal and gave birth to the Minotaur, the creature of half man, half bull, hidden in the labyrinth beneath the palace. To the Greeks, this was tragedy. To the Minoans, it may have been something older, a memory transformed into myth. The union of woman and bull, of human and divine, was the union of creation itself. But as with all myths, what begins as reverence can turn to fear. Walk with me through the lower chambers of Knossos, where the air grows cool and the corridors twist upon themselves. The walls close in, the light fades. You can feel how the palace earned its later name, labyrinth. It is easy to believe that such a maze might have inspired the legend of the Minotaur. But here, there are no monsters, only the memory of a people who lived by the law of cycles, by the understanding that every gift of life is shadowed by its cost. Still, the myth endures because it holds a truth. Every civilization must face its own beast, the wildness within, the hunger that power awakens. Perhaps the Minoans, in their perfection of beauty and peace, felt that darkness stirring too. Perhaps the cult of the bull was their way of keeping it close, controlled, contained within ritual before it could break free. Outside, the sun has dipped behind the mountains. The courtyard is shadowed now, the horns of consecration outlined against a violet sky. Somewhere, a conch shell sounds deep, mournful, like the voice of the sea itself. You imagine the final moments of the festival. The leapers exhausted, their bodies gleaming with sweat and dust. The bull, trembling, its great sides heaving. The priestess steps forward, lays a hand on its head, whispers a prayer. The drums fade. The people bow their heads. Then silence. The ritual is over. The balance restored. Tomorrow, life will continue, ships will sail, potters will shape clay, children will play in the streets. But tonight, the people of Crete sleep knowing they have honored the power that shapes them, the wild, untamable heartbeat of the world. The bull's image will follow them into eternity. Long after their palaces crumble, the symbol remains, carved into stone, painted on pottery, pressed into gold. And through that image, their spirit moves on, through the myths of Greece, through the tale of Europa carried across the sea, through the labyrinth's winding corridors of story and symbol. Even now, when you stand among the ruins of Knossos, you can see the curve of those horns etched against the sky. The wind slips between them, making a sound almost like breath. It feels as though the island itself is exhaling, slowly, deeply, as if after holding its breath for 3,000 years. The bull is gone, but its echo remains. And that echo grows louder, carried by the waves. For soon, the island will tremble again, not from the footsteps of dancers or the charge of bulls, but from something far greater. The earth will stir beneath the sea. The sky will darken. And the same power the Minoans once worshipped in awe will rise against them, unbridled. The bull's roar will become the voice of the volcano. But for now, the night is still. The stars drift above the palace like sparks. The air smells of ash and salt and memory. You stand at the threshold, where myth meets history, and listen to the sea's endless murmur. It sounds almost like a warning, or perhaps a lullaby. Either way, the story moves on, unbroken, toward the labyrinth's heart, where beauty begins to tremble beneath the weight of its own perfection. The night breathes quietly over Crete. The waves, still warm from the day, lap against the shore in a rhythm that feels ancient, the heartbeat of an island that has always lived between worlds. Behind you, the horns of Knossos rise black against the moonlight. Their edges gleam faintly, like the tips of a crown, or a warning. The bull's festival has ended, the dancers are gone, the torch is extinguished. Yet as you stand in the courtyard, the air still hums with energy, that electric silence that follows great movement, when the body still remembers what the mind has yet to name. It is then, in that hush, that you notice the passages. Narrow corridors leading inward. Cool air drifting up from unseen depths. You step closer. The walls close around you, their plaster smooth beneath your fingertips. The faint smell of earth rises, dust, stone, time. Light fades. The sound of the sea softens until all that remains is the echo of your own breath. This is Knossos beneath Knossos. And it is here that the labyrinth begins. Not a prison, not quite. Not even, perhaps, a maze. But a living puzzle, a palace turned inward, folding upon itself in endless passageways. Corridors twist and rise, stairs descend only to climb again. Sunlight filters down through shafts from above, glancing off walls once painted in bright colors now long faded to whispers of ochre and gray. Archaeologists, when they uncovered this place, struggled to make sense of it. The sheer complexity defied logic. Hundreds of rooms, connected in patterns that seemed almost organic, storehouses, workshops, sanctuaries, courtyards, staircases looping in circles. To the Minoans, this was not confusion. It was philosophy carved in stone. Their world revolved around cycles, life and death, sea and sky, creation and decay. The labyrinth was their reflection of the universe, not straight, not simple, but beautiful in its mystery. Even its name, Labyrinthos, may come from the word labris, the double axe, symbol of the goddess and of balance. The labyrinth, then, was not a trap, but a sacred pattern, the pathway to understanding divine order. Every turn, every descent, every ascent was a metaphor for life itself. But centuries later, when the Greeks inherited these ruins, they saw them differently. They saw darkness. They saw the unknown. And from that fear, a myth was born. They told of King Minos, who built this labyrinth to house a monster, the Minotaur, born of human sin and divine retribution. A creature half man, half bull, doomed to wander the endless corridors, feeding on those sent to appease the gods. It is a story of punishment, of guilt, of heroism, the Greek way of explaining what they could not understand about this peaceful, radiant civilization that came before them. But perhaps, beneath the myth, something truer lingers. Because the labyrinth, as it survives in stone, does not feel like a place of horror. It feels like a temple, a journey inward, a reminder that every civilization, every soul, must confront its own shadow before it can emerge into light again. You walk deeper. The air cools further, still and dense. The floor slopes gently down, then turns abruptly. Ahead, faint light flickers, reflections of oil lamps placed here by archaeologists long ago. The walls glisten faintly with moisture. You can almost hear, beneath your footsteps, the faint hum of voices, the murmur of artisans, priests, servants moving through the corridors thousands of years before. In one chamber, the ceiling soars unexpectedly high. Carved pillars rise like petrified trees. The space feels vast, echoing, impossible. This, perhaps, was a sanctuary, a place where ceremonies were held in shadow and firelight. Imagine it alive again, torches blazing, drums reverberating through the stone, the air thick with incense and the scent of wine. Figures move between pillars, men carrying offerings, women in flowing skirts, their bracelets flashing in the flame. At the far end, before a painted wall, stands a priestess. In her hands, a double axe glints red with reflected fire. She raises it, not to strike, but to catch the light. Around her, the crowd falls silent. It is a scene of reverence, not fear. Of balance, the very balance the labyrinth embodies. And yet, there is an unease in this beauty. Every civilization has its center, the place where its spirit dwells, and here, in these winding halls, the Minoans built theirs. But in time, what was sacred became strange, and what was strange became myth. Perhaps, after the great eruption of Thera, when ash darkened the sky and earthquakes cracked the island, the labyrinth no longer felt like protection. It became a mirror of chaos, the ordered world collapsing into confusion. The Greeks, inheriting the ruins, could only imagine that such a place must have held a monster. But maybe the monster was only time, the slow turning of fate, devouring what it once created. Still, the story endures. You can almost see it unfold in your mind's eye. The arrival of Theseus from Athens, brave and reckless, Ariadne, daughter of Minos, watching him from the palace steps, her heart caught between love and doom. She gives him a thread, a simple cord of spun flax, and with it, he enters the labyrinth to face the beast. Down, down he goes, through corridors that twist like the veins of the earth. The walls close in. The air grows heavy. And then, in the dark, he finds it, the Minotaur, breathing, waiting, half in shadow. A struggle, a cry, silence. Then Theseus follows the thread back to daylight, leaving behind the body of the monster, the echo of the labyrinth, and the beginning of a legend that will outlive them all. But what if that thread was more than a lifeline? What if it was remembrance, the last fragile connection to a truth already fading from memory? Ariadne's thread, glinting in the dark, becomes something larger, the human desire to find meaning amid the maze of existence. It is the same thread we follow now, across centuries, through ruins, through myth, through the fragile light of history, trying to understand a world that vanished, yet never entirely died. You pause. The air has grown still again. The flicker of lamplight catches something ahead, a carving on the wall, faint but unmistakable, a spiral. The oldest of human symbols. Endless, fluid, returning always to its center. It is carved here not as decoration, but as instruction. The labyrinth, the spiral, the double axe, all are one message, the path of return. Return to the goddess. Return to balance. Return to the truth that the end is always the beginning. You reach out and trace the spiral with your fingers. The stone is cold, rough. For a moment, the centuries vanish. You can feel the touch of the carver's hand, patient, deliberate, sure. Perhaps he, too, knew that one day someone would stand here in the half-light, seeking what was lost. When you emerge again, the sun is already climbing. The ruins of Knossos stretch before you, luminous in the morning light. The walls are pale gold, the columns crimson, the shadows deep blue. From above, the palace seems less a maze than a pattern, deliberate, harmonious, alive. The labyrinth, seen from the sky, is no trap at all. It is order, misunderstood. And perhaps that is the final lesson of Knossos, that mystery, when seen from within, feels like chaos, but from above, it forms a perfect design. The Minoans understood that. They built their world as an act of faith in beauty, in balance, in cycles of loss and return. Even their myths, twisted by layered tongues, still carry that wisdom, that to walk the labyrinth is not to escape it, but to know it, to accept its turns as part of the journey. You stand on the terrace and look down into the ruins. The wind rises again, moving through the columns with a sound like breath. The sunlight shifts. For a heartbeat, the whole palace seems to shimmer, red and gold and white, alive once more. The dancers leap, the priestesses sing, the bull charges, the drums echo. And at the center, the goddess waits, not to punish, but to remind. As the light softens, you step back toward the edge of the hill. Below, the sea gleams, blue upon blue, a labyrinth of its own. Ships once sailed from that horizon, carrying Minoan goods, Minoan stories, Minoan dreams. All that remains now are stones, fragments, whispers. And yet in those whispers you can still hear the truth. The labyrinth was never a prison. It was a mirror. A reflection of the human soul, vast, mysterious, eternally turning toward its own light. You walk away slowly, the wind at your back, the ruins glowing behind you like embers in the afternoon sun. The path winds downward toward the valley, the air heavy with the scent of pine and dust. Somewhere below, the sea calls again, low and rhythmic, as it always has. The labyrinth fades behind you, but its pattern remains, within you now, woven into memory, into the pulse of the story itself. And as you walk, the sound of waves deepens, darker now, heavier, carrying the first tremors of the world's next turning. The island that danced will soon shake. The sea that blessed will soon betray. The rhythm of life begins to shift, almost imperceptibly. And without a break in the breath, the story moves onward, into the trembling heart of nature itself. The path from Knossos winds downward through terraces of olive and fig, the air rich with heat and scent. The cicadas are loud now, pulsing like hidden drums in the hills. Above, the sky gleams a hard blue. Below, the sea shimmers with silver light. The island breathes, a single, vast body, alive with motion. You walk along it slowly, tracing the veins of ancient paths that lead from the palace to the fields. The wind follows you, tugging at your hair, carrying with it the voices of the past, laughter, the clatter of amphorae, the low hum of distant prayer. Everywhere, life hums in perfect rhythm. For the Minoans, this harmony was everything. They lived not in defiance of the elements, but in concert with them. The earth fed them, the sea sustained them, the wind guided their ships, and the sun shaped their time. Every force of nature was a god to them, unpredictable, powerful, yet intimate. To understand the Minoans, you must listen not only to their art or their ruins, but to the wind, the water, the trembling of the soil beneath your feet. These were their scriptures. These were their temples. Walk inland toward the foothills. The olive groves give way to wild meadows where the air smells of sage and thyme. The earth is red here, iron-rich, warm to the touch. It stains your sandals as you climb. Somewhere far above, a falcon circles, its shadow sweeping across the rocks like a passing thought. The Minoans built their sanctuaries in such places, open to the sky, exposed to the breath of the world. There are no walls here, no ceilings, no gates. Only a ring of stones, a low altar, a few fragments of pottery left from offerings long turned to dust. You can almost see the ritual unfold, a small group of women and men, their faces painted with ochre, their robes tied with cords of linen. They carry baskets of fruit, jars of oil, sprigs of herbs. They kneel, place their offerings on the stone, and raise their hands to the horizon. They do not beg for mercy. They give thanks. In the distance, the sea flashes with light. The wind changes direction, sweeping across the mountain with the scent of rain. The priestess smiles, a sign that the gods have heard. Down by the coast, the same reverence takes a different shape. The harbors of Crete are alive with motion, ships bobbing in the tide, ropes creaking, gulls crying overhead. The smell of tar, salt, and fish mingles with the sharper perfume of saffron and wine. Sailors move with practiced rhythm, their skin bronzed by the sun, their eyes fixed on the horizon. The sea is both their livelihood and their god. They know its moods, its silences, its tempers. They name the currents as one might name friends. Before setting sail, they pour wine into the water, watching it swirl red against the blue, an offering to the unseen powers below. The waves close over it softly, and the ship drifts outward, its oars dipping into the vast, liquid mirror. They believe the sea remembers kindness. The Minoans had no need to fear the natural world, because they had never separated themselves from it. They studied the patterns of the stars to mark their seasons. They built their palaces in alignment with the solstices, the windows and doorways positioned so that sunlight poured into sacred chambers on certain days of the year. At Knossos, for instance, the rising sun at midsummer would have struck directly through a corridor, illuminating the throne room in golden fire. It was as if the goddess herself had entered. At other times, the moonlight would fall upon the same space, cool and pale, balancing what the sun had begun. The Minoans measured time not by conquest or kings, but by the turning of the world, the waxing and waning of the moon, the swell and retreat of the tide, the tremor and renewal of the earth. To them, eternity was not linear. It was a circle, endless and comforting. And yet, there was another rhythm pulsing beneath this harmony, deeper, slower, more dangerous. Crete sits upon the edge of a restless sea, born of fire and fault lines. Beneath the soil, beneath the olive roots and the sleeping villages, the earth is alive, shifting, groaning, dreaming. The Minoans must have felt it sometimes, the subtle tremor beneath their feet, the quiet creak of stone. Perhaps they saw it not as threat, but as reminder, the goddess moving in her sleep. They built with her, not against her. Their buildings flexed with the tremors, the walls reinforced with wooden beams that could sway without breaking. Even in this, their architecture mirrored their philosophy: to bend was to survive. But the gods are not always gentle. One afternoon, centuries before their world would end, the people of Knossos might have felt the earth shudder. A cup falls from a shelf. Dust sifts from the ceiling. Outside, goats bleat, birds scatter from the rooftops. The tremor passes quickly, leaving the city untouched. The priestesses would have led offerings to the altars, pouring wine for appeasement, scattering flowers. The people would have returned to work, believing the goddess had merely stirred, restless for a moment. And for a while, the island would sleep again. But far to the north, beyond the horizon, another island, Thera, was awakening. Beneath its mountains, fire and pressure built in silence. The sea above was calm, the air clear, the gulls circling in their usual patterns. And still, below, the earth began to churn. The Minoans could not have known it. Their ships still sailed. Their markets still hummed. Their rituals still echoed through the palaces, the smoke of incense still curling toward the sun. They believed themselves in harmony with the elements, and perhaps they were. But harmony, as they knew, is a living thing. It shifts. It changes. Balance must always move. You walk along a ridge overlooking the sea. The air smells of pine and brine. Below, the water gleams dark and glassy, almost too still. A gull cries, distant and lonely. The wind drops. It is in such stillness that the world often turns. For centuries, Crete had danced in rhythm with the earth and the sea. But soon, the dance would falter, not because they angered their gods, but because the same powers that gave them life would demand it back. The volcano on Thera would tear open the sky. The sea would rise in fury. The air would darken with ash. But that is still to come. Here, in this moment before, the world holds its breath. The wind sighs again, soft and sweet. The hills glow in the late light. In the valleys below, farmers finish their work and gather around fires. The smell of roasting grain and honey drifts upward. The first stars appear, and the sea mirrors them perfectly, as if nothing in the world could ever break such peace. The Minoans must have felt this, too, the perfection before the change, the calm before the storm. Perhaps they stood on the same cliffs and watched the same sunset, believing the balance would last forever. They had built their lives upon it. After all, the equilibrium between earth and sky, between human and divine, between strength and surrender. And if the gods whispered of what was coming, the Minoans would have heard it as music, not warning. For to them, destruction was not the end of the cycle, but its continuation. The night deepens. The air cools. The stars blaze like scattered embers across the velvet sky. Somewhere below, the surf keeps time with your heartbeat. Crete sleeps in the cradle of its elements, lulled by the same forces that will one day shake it awake. And as you stand at the edge of the sea, the story shifts almost imperceptibly. The air grows heavy. The horizon darkens. Far away, beyond the curve of the world, a low sound rumbles, so faint you almost mistake it for thunder. The gods are stirring. The cycle begins to turn. The Minoans, who once danced in perfect harmony with the elements, are about to learn that even harmony has its breaking point. The sea will rise. The sky will darken. The island will tremble. And history, the oldest element of all, will remember. The air is too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in the bones, that presses against the skin as if the world itself is holding its breath. You stand once more on the cliffs of Crete, overlooking the Aegean. The water gleams black and silver under the pale morning sun. No wind, no waves, the sea is a mirror. Even the gulls have vanished. In the villages below, people move slowly, glancing toward the horizon where a faint haze hangs, gray against the blue. Smoke, perhaps, or dust caught in the dawn light. Nothing that stirs real alarm. Not yet. But somewhere far to the north, beyond the horizon, beyond even the keenest sailor's eye, the island of Thera trembles. For centuries it has slept, its slopes peaceful, its towns busy with trade and laughter. Now, deep beneath its mountains, fire and pressure have gathered, silent, patient, unstoppable. The earth groans softly. A vibration, a sigh. Then a pause. And then, the first explosion. It begins with a sound like the tearing of the sky. A thunder that does not fade, but grows, rolling, rising, echoing across the sea until even the birds in Crete scatter in terror. The ground shakes beneath your feet. Pebbles skitter down the path. The air tastes of dust and iron. On the horizon, a column of smoke appears, vast, dark, towering higher than any storm cloud. It climbs into the sky, twisting, expanding, blooming into a monstrous, black flower. Lightning flashes within it, silent and bright. The people of Crete must have watched from their fields, their markets, their terraces, staring northward as day turned to twilight. They did not yet know that they were witnessing one of the greatest cataclysms in human history. The volcano of Thera, what we now call Santorini, had awakened. The eruption comes in waves. First, the ash, a rain of fine, gray powder drifting down like snow, coating the land, settling into every crack and fold. It blots out the sun, turns the sky to a dull orange. The air smells of sulfur, of burning stone. The sea grows restless, heaving as if in pain. Then comes the fire, the heart of the mountain tearing itself apart. Rivers of molten rock pour into the caldera, exploding on contact with the sea. Steam billows upward in vast white plumes. Shockwaves roll outward across the Aegean, flattening waves, breaking ships, cracking the walls of distant villages. The sound is unending, a deep, rolling roar that seems to come from everywhere at once. Even on Crete, more than 100 kilometers away, the tremors do not stop. Walls groan. Amphorae shatter. Animals panic. The priestesses hurry to the courtyards, lifting their hands to the darkened sky, calling to the goddess who now answers with thunder. In Akrotiri, the great Minoan city on Thera itself, the world ends in silence. Archaeologists would find it centuries later, frozen in time beneath layers of ash, its frescoes still brilliant, its furniture still in place, its stairways still clean and swept. There were no bodies. The people had fled. They must have seen the signs, the shaking earth, the rising smoke, the sea pulling strangely away from the shore. They gathered what they could and escaped, their ships gliding south toward Crete, believing they would return. But what followed was beyond anything the ancient world had ever known. The mountains split open. The sea rushed in. And then, with a force so great that it could be heard for hundreds of miles, the island of Thera exploded. The sky became fire. Ash rose higher than clouds, blotting out the sun for days. The sea boiled where it met the molten rock. Entire islands disappeared beneath the waves. A wall of water, a tsunami hundreds of feet high, surged outward from the collapsing caldera, racing across the Aegean at the speed of a storm. When it reached Crete, it struck the northern coast with unimaginable force. Harbors vanished. Ships were flung inland, shattering against cliffs. Salt water rushed through valleys, sweeping away fields, homes, and temples. Those who survived clung to the upper hills, watching as their world drowned below them. The Minoans, who had always trusted the sea as their protector, now saw it transformed into their destroyer. For days, perhaps weeks, the sun did not return. Ash fell like snow across the island. The air was thick and heavy, difficult to breathe. Crops withered in their fields. The olive trees turned gray. Livestock died where they stood. The people gathered in their palaces, lighting lamps that barely pierced the darkness. They must have whispered to each other in fear, wondering what sin could have brought such wrath. The priestesses made offerings, burning incense, pouring wine into the cracked earth, calling out to the goddess who had once smiled upon them. But the sky gave no answer. Only the rumble of distant thunder, the echo of the earth's heart still breaking itself apart. In time, the rain began, black and bitter, tasting of sulfur. Streams turned to mud. Roofs collapsed under the weight of ash. And still, the people waited. They were a civilization of beauty, of balance, of harmony. But no art, no ritual, no prayer could calm the fury of the elements now unleashed. When the light finally returned, it was dim, pale, as though filtered through smoke. The sea was no longer blue, but a dull green-gray. The air smelled of salt and rot. Crete survived, but changed. The great palaces still stood, though cracked and scorched. Knossos endured, its frescoes still bright beneath soot and dust. But the spirit that had filled these halls was broken. The people were alive, yes, but haunted. They began to rebuild, but the rhythm of their world had shifted. Trade routes were gone. Crops failed. Famine spread. And with them came unrest. The sea, once their ally, now filled them with dread. Each tremor of the ground, each darkening of the sky, each roar of thunder carried the memory of that day. Even their myths began to change. The goddess who had once nurtured them became distant, unpredictable, feared. The age of harmony had ended. And yet, amid the ruin, something endures. You stand now among the fallen stones of a coastal town, its streets half buried in time, its walls melted smooth by centuries of wind and sun. The air is still heavy with memory. When you close your eyes, you can almost hear the sea as it must have sounded that day, not cruel, but sorrowful. Because the sea is not evil. It simply is. The Minoans had always known that the world is cyclical, that creation and destruction are twins. The eruption proved them right, though at a cost they could not bear. The goddess they worshipped, the spirit of nature itself, had not betrayed them. She had simply revealed her other face. And even in that face there is all. Centuries later, when Greek poets would speak of Atlantis, a shining island swallowed by the sea, they would be remembering this. The smoke of Thera, the drowned cities, the vanished palaces. The Minoans became legend, their world blurred into myth, their tragedy retold as a warning about pride and divine retribution. But perhaps it was not pride that doomed them. Perhaps it was simply their closeness to the forces that create and destroy. They lived beside the gods, too near the heart of the earth. The eruption of Thera was both an ending and a seed, scattering fragments of Minoan art, religion, and memory across the Mediterranean. In every temple built later, in every myth of balance and loss, a little of Crete's light still flickers. Now, standing here centuries later, you watch the same sea that once rose to consume them. The sun glints on its surface, gentle again, forgiving. The air smells of thyme and salt. A fishing boat drifts in the distance, its wake tracing silver lines across the blue. The island endures. The sea forgets nothing. And you realize that perhaps this is how memory survives, not through monuments or palaces, but through rhythm. The rhythm of waves, of wind, of time itself. The Minoans are gone, but their harmony, their grace, their understanding of beauty's fragility, it still lingers in the world that took them. Every sunrise over the Aegean is their requiem. Every calm sea, their forgiveness. The wind rises soft and warm. The sky glows with fading light. Somewhere out over the horizon, the island of Thera still smolders beneath the waves, silent now, but eternal. And as night falls, the stars appear, reflected perfectly in the dark water below. It looks, for a moment, like the heavens have drowned. But then you see it, the faintest ripple, the slow, steady breath of the sea returning to itself. The cycle restored. The earth sleeps again. And the story, without pause, moves onward. Toward the aftermath. Toward the sea that turns destroyer once more. Toward the slow, inevitable fading of the Minoan world. The air over Crete has changed. It is heavier now, thicker, as though the island itself is still holding its breath after the violence of the sea. Weeks have passed since the eruption of Thera, yet the sun still feels dimmer. The horizon glows with a strange pallor, the light filtered through a haze of drifting ash that refuses to fall. Even at midday, shadows blur and stretch as though unsure where to lie. You stand on a ridge above the northern coast, where the waves once struck hardest. The fields below are scarred, groves of olive trees drowned in salt water, the earth white with dried sea foam. Fragments of boats lie scattered across the inland plain, stranded where the sea had no right to reach. The people rebuild what they can. They dig at the soil, plant new seeds, patch roofs, mend nets. But the rhythm is gone. The confidence that once filled their days, the easy laughter, the graceful certainty of balance, has vanished like breath in the wind. Now there is only waiting. Waiting for the earth to stop trembling. Waiting for the sky to clear. Waiting for the sea to forgive them. At night, the island dreams uneasily. The sea still moves strangely, retreating too far, rushing back too fast. Some nights the waves crash with no wind, the tide rising and falling as though breathing through some hidden wound. Fishermen whisper that they hear sounds beneath the surface, a low, rhythmic pounding, like drums echoing from another world. Some say it is the gods still angry. Others, that it is the heartbeat of Thera itself, still alive beneath the waves. No one ventures far from shore anymore. The great Minoan ships, once the pride of the Aegean, sit silent in their harbors, their hulls crusted with ash. The sails rot where they hang. The merchants who once crossed the sea to Egypt and Cyprus now trade only among nearby villages, wary of the horizon that betrayed them. The island that once ruled the waves now fears them. And yet Knossos endures. Its walls still stand, its courtyards still echo faintly with life. But the palace feels hollow now, the frescoes dimmed by soot, the air heavy with the scent of oil lamps burning too long in closed rooms. The priests continue their rituals, though their prayers sound more like questions. The offerings grow meager: a few grapes, a jar of water, a strand of saffron once worth its weight in gold. In the throne room, the great alabaster seat sits empty. The griffins painted on the walls seem to watch with sad, knowing eyes. Once symbols of protection, they now look like witnesses. Still, the people come. They kneel before the altars, whispering to the goddess who had once filled these chambers with warmth and music. But even she feels distant now, her presence thinned like smoke in cold air. The earthquakes continue, smaller now, but constant, each tremor a reminder that the island is no longer steady beneath their feet. Out in the countryside, life has grown harder. The once green terraces lie buried under layers of ash. The rains that follow are acidic, turning streams black and bitter. Goats refuse to drink. Crops sprout weak and yellow. Families abandon the coast, moving inland toward the hills. The old trade ports fall silent. Villages shrink. Hunger begins to whisper. And where hunger lives, fear follows. The people begin to search for causes, for something or someone to blame. Some whisper that the gods have turned away. Others say the priestesses have lost their favor, that their dances and songs no longer reach the heavens. The old harmony between men and women, between mortal and divine, begins to fracture. The delicate balance that once defined Minoan life, the trust in beauty, in rhythm, in peace, starts to tilt toward doubt. In the cracks of the temples and in the silence of the fields, something unseen begins to change. At first, it is subtle. A shift in leadership, fewer women among the rituals, more men carrying axes, speaking with certainty instead of grace. The double axe, once a symbol of balance, now feels heavier, more dangerous. The bull festivals continue, but the dances are fewer, the leaps rougher, the blood spilled more freely. What was once a celebration of life becomes an appeasement of fear. The goddess of renewal becomes the goddess of vengeance. Her smile fades from the frescoes, replaced by colder eyes. The Minoans begin to worship not for joy, but for survival. It is as though the eruption has not only scarred the land, but shifted something deep in the soul of the people, turning their art inward, their faith darker, their gaze toward the horizon where destruction came. And yet, there are moments of strange beauty still. On a quiet morning after rain, the air smells clean again, wet earth, crushed sage, salt. Children chase one another through the streets, laughing. A woman hangs bright cloths from her balcony, their colors fluttering in the breeze like fragments of the old world refusing to fade. The Minoans endure. They always have. They rebuild their walls, repaint their frescoes, replant their fields. Even in ruin, they cannot forget the art of life. But beneath their painted floors, the earth still moves. Small tremors ripple through the island, gentle at first, then sharper, stronger. The people pause, listening. The lamps sway. The gods, it seems, have not finished speaking. The waves return one final time. No one knows exactly when, perhaps months after the eruption, perhaps years. But one night, under a moonless sky, the sea withdraws once more, vanishing into the horizon. Those awake watch in confusion. The beach is stretched wide and bare, the rocks glistening under starlight. Fish flop helplessly on the wet sand. Then, a sound, deep, hollow, growing louder. The sea comes back. A wall of water, black and immense, racing toward the shore. It hits with a roar that shakes the mountains. Villages vanish. Fires drown. The air fills with the hiss of salt and stone. When morning comes, nothing remains of the northern coast. The palaces near the sea are gutted. Entire towns erased. The once proud harbors filled with sand. The Minoans, who had built their civilization on the grace of the sea, now find themselves staring into its silence. After that, there is no true recovery. The survivors retreat inland, gathering around Knossos like children around a dying fire. They rebuild, but smaller, quieter. Trade falters, art fades. The colors on their walls grow dull. The laughter that once filled their festivals turns cautious, uncertain. Something invisible has ended. Even nature seems subdued, the fields sparse, the bees fewer, the air heavier. The gods no longer speak in wind and wave, but in tremors and absence. And into that silence, other voices begin to drift, from across the sea, from mainland Greece. The Mycenaeans, warriors and traders both, drawn by the promise of a wounded paradise. They come quietly at first, then more boldly, their ships slipping into Minoan harbors like shadows returning to their source. You stand again at the shore, where the water meets the land. The sea is calm now, almost impossibly so. The surface gleams gold in the dying light. If you didn't know what had happened, you might think this was peace. But peace has a sound, and this silence is something else, the stillness after the storm, when even the waves seem to remember. A single gull cries overhead. The sound echoes, then fades. The sea has given everything it could. It has taken everything back. And as the night rises, you can feel the weight of that loss pressing softly on the air, not cruelty, not punishment, but the quiet finality of a cycle complete. The Minoans have survived, but their golden world has begun to dim. The sea that once crowned them has stripped them bare. The waves that carried their glory have carried away their certainty. And though their cities will flicker on for a while longer, though Knossos will glow for another century before it, too, falls, something essential has already ended. The age of grace is closing. The age of shadow begins. You turn away from the water. The wind is cool now, tasting faintly of ash and memory. The stars tremble above you, reflected in the dark, endless sea. Each one seems to whisper the same truth the Minoans once knew, that nothing endures unchanged, that even beauty must bow to time. You walk back toward the hills, where the lights of Knossos still flicker faintly in the distance. The air hums with a deep, slow rhythm, not of life, not of death, but of continuation. The waves have done their work. The island will never be the same. And as you climb, the sound of the sea fades behind you, replaced by another, the distant echo of voices, stories, myths beginning to take shape in the ruins of what was. Because from the wreckage of this world, something new is stirring, not a civilization, but a legend. The sea is quiet again. Too quiet. It stretches before you like polished glass, reflecting a sky pale with dawn. The air smells faintly of salt and smoke, the ghosts of all that was lost. You walk the shoreline where once stood the bustling harbors of northern Crete. The sand is dark here, mixed with ash and fragments of pottery. Each wave that rolls and brings a whisper from the deep, the soft grinding of shells and shards, the faint sigh of centuries turning over themselves. There are no ships now. No songs of sailors, no laughter from the markets. Only the sea, endless and unchanged. But even in ruin, memory begins to move. It is the way of human hearts. When the world collapses, we build stories to make sense of it. And so, from the ashes of the Minoan world, a legend is born, one that will drift, like the tide itself, across the centuries. In the villages that survive, the old people begin to tell tales. They speak in hushed voices of a time before the darkness, when Crete was the center of the world, an island blessed by the gods, rich beyond imagining, peaceful and radiant. They tell their children of palaces that gleamed in the sun, of frescoes alive with color, of dancers leaping bulls beneath open skies. They describe courtyards filled with laughter, feasts beneath the stars, music that echoed between marble columns. And then, the sky turned black. The sea rose. The island trembled. The gods withdrew their light. What began as history becomes myth, as myth becomes memory, and memory becomes warning. Years pass. Generations. The survivors' descendants forget the details, but the feeling remains that something golden once existed, and that the sea took it. Travelers hear the story and carry it onward, to mainland Greece, to the islands of the Cyclades, to the shores of Egypt. With each retelling, the island grows more splendid, the disaster more divine. By the time Plato tells it, 1,000 years later, it has become a parable, a city of wonder and pride, rich in wisdom, punished by the gods for its hubris and drowned beneath the waves. He calls it Atlantis. And though he places it far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, many who hear him wonder if he is really speaking of Crete, the island that ruled the sea, the island that vanished in fire and water. You walk inland, away from the shore, toward the ruins of Knossos. The path winds through quiet fields, dotted with poppies and broken stones. The air hums with insects, the smell of thyme heavy in the heat. The palace rises slowly ahead, half buried in sunlight and shadow. Its red columns glow like blood, its stairways open onto nothing. Once, this place was alive, the heart of a world that had no need of walls. Now it stands as a monument to impermanence. You climb the worn steps and stand in what was once the central court. The ground beneath you still bears faint traces of fresco, a curl of blue wave, the curve of a bull's horn, the hem of a dancer's skirt. Each fragment a heartbeat, still pulsing softly through the dust. It is easy to see why later generations turned this place into legend. Even in ruin, it possesses something uncanny, a grace that feels almost impossible, as if the island itself remembers its former perfection and refuses to let go. Archaeologists will one day find these stones and call it rebirth, the rediscovery of a forgotten civilization. But the truth is older, deeper. The Minoans never really vanished. They dissolved into story. Every myth that followed carries an echo of them. The goddess who rules from the mountain, that is the Minoan mother. The bull that walks through the labyrinth, that is the old ritual, remembered as terror. Ariadne, the woman with the thread, she is every priestess who guided her people through the maze of faith and fear. Even the word labyrinth, itself, the house of the double axe, is their language, fossilized in ours. They did not die. They transformed. Imagine, for a moment, how their story must have sounded when first told around a hearth. An island at the center of the sea, shining like the morning star. Its people lived without war or want. They built palaces open to the wind, filled with music and color. The gods walked among them, for they needed no temples. The island itself was sacred. But beauty breeds forgetting. The people grew proud, too certain of their peace. And the gods, seeing this, sent warning, tremors beneath the earth, storms over the sea. The people did not listen. So the gods sent fire, and water, and silence. When the sun returned, nothing remained but ruins beneath the waves. It is a story so simple, so human, that it could belong to any age. But it was born here, on this island, where myth and memory first intertwined. As you walk through the ruins, the air shimmers with heat. A faint breeze stirs the dust, lifting it in tiny spirals that dance briefly before falling again. You pause beside a fallen column, its paint long faded but still faintly red in the light. Touch it. The stone is warm. Here, the line between legend and history blurs completely. Every stone hums with a double life, one real, one imagined. Perhaps that is why the Minoans have never truly left us, because they existed in both worlds from the beginning. They lived as though myth were reality, painting gods and dolphins and acrobats with the same brush, breathing beauty into every surface, every gesture. When the world finally took them, they left behind not just ruins, but a dream too vivid to fade. A dream so strong it became memory. memory so deep it became myth. Myth so enduring it became truth again. The sun begins to set. The shadows lengthen, the air cools. The sea below Knossos glows like bronze. You sit on a low wall and watch as the light turns the ruins gold. In the distance, the hills are blue silhouettes against the sky. For a moment, it feels as though time has folded, as though you are seeing what they saw, breathing what they breathed. Somewhere, faintly, the wind shifts and you almost hear music, the rhythm of drums, the call of flutes, the laughter of dancers. It might be memory, or imagination, or both. The past never truly leaves us. It moves like water, shaping the present, flowing into every story we tell. When Plato wrote of Atlantis, he claimed it was a warning, a civilization destroyed by its own arrogance. But perhaps he misunderstood. Perhaps Atlantis, Crete, was not a warning at all, but a promise. That beauty can exist. That harmony can be built. That even when the sea takes it away, the idea remains, shining beneath the waves. The Minoans built the first dream of paradise, not through conquest, but through grace. And though their island fell, the dream survived. It moved through the veins of myth into the blood of every civilization that followed. When we speak of lost Edens, golden ages, cities of light, we are still speaking of them. The sun slips below the horizon. The sea catches its last fire. For a heartbeat, the whole world glows, red, gold, blue, violet, the same colors that once covered these walls. Then darkness. You sit in the quiet and listen to the waves. Each one feels like a heartbeat. Each one a whisper of the world that was. You understand now that the Minoans never truly disappeared. They became the silence between waves, the shimmer of color at the edge of light, the rhythm that still moves through every human act of creation. They became the idea that perfection, once glimpsed, never dies, it only hides, waiting to be rediscovered. And so the legend of Atlantis is not a story of loss, but of return. Because every time someone stands at the edge of the sea, watching the horizon burn with sunset, some small part of them remembers. The air cools. The stars rise. The wind hums softly through the olive trees, carrying with it the faint salt of the sea. You close your eyes and breathe it in. In the distance, waves break softly against the shore, the same rhythm that once guided Minoan dancers, that still shapes the world's edge. And as the night deepens, the island seems to exhale, a long, slow sigh of peace. The story continues unbroken. The legend lives, changing shape but never ending. And far out over the water, beneath the same stars that watched over Crete's golden age, the sea whispers the oldest truth of all. Nothing that is beautiful is ever truly lost. It only waits, patient, eternal, beneath the waves. The night lingers softly over Crete. The stars hang low, trembling in the slow breath of the wind. You stand among the ruins of Knossos, the stones cool beneath your hands, the air filled with the faint scent of time and sea salt. The fires have long gone out, but the warmth remains, a residue of centuries. In the distance, the sea murmurs, not with the fury of the waves that once destroyed this island, but with the calm rhythm of return. It is the same voice that sang to the Minoans, the same song that will outlive even memory. And as you listen, something strange happens. The silence begins to speak. You hear laughter, faint, musical. The echo of drums. The flutter of silk skirts in motion. The sound fades, but it leaves behind an ache, a familiarity, as if you have heard it before, not in this life, but in a story told long ago. Because the Minoans, though gone, never stopped speaking. Their voice simply changed its shape. The echoes began quietly. In the stories of the Greeks, who came after them, fragments of the old world resurfaced like shells from the tide. There was Europa, the woman who rode across the sea on the back of a bull, carried from the shores of Phoenicia to the island of Crete. To the Greeks, she was a mortal loved by Zeus. But beneath that tale lies the memory of something older, the sacred union of woman and bull, the dance of divinity and earth that the Minoans had once celebrated. And Minos, the king who ruled Crete, his name, too, is an echo. Perhaps not one man, but a title passed from ruler to ruler, much like Pharaoh in Egypt. The Greeks made him the son of Zeus, the judge of souls in the underworld. But in truth, he was likely the shadow of a forgotten priest-king, who once presided over these open palaces with their red columns and painted walls. Even the Minotaur, half man, half beast, is a distorted reflection. A memory twisted by time, born from the Minoans' sacred bull-leaping, their rituals of power and grace. What the Greeks saw as monstrous may once have been divine. You wander through the ruins, past frescoes that have outlasted empires. A dolphin leaps forever across a wall of blue. A woman gathers saffron beneath a painted sun. Their colors, faded but not gone, seem to glow from within. Art outlives language. And in these colors, the Minoans still breathe. When Greek artisans painted the first images of their gods, of Athena, of Artemis, of Aphrodite, they were unknowingly borrowing gestures, shapes, and symbols from this older world. The Minoan goddess with serpents in her hands became Athena with her owl, Artemis with her hound, Demeter with her sheaves of grain. Even the grace of Greek sculpture, the balance of form and movement, the way marble seems to breathe, owes something to this island, where beauty was once the language of faith. The Greeks inherited the Minoans' reverence for the body, for proportion, for the living harmony of motion. They turned it into philosophy, into art, into the very foundation of Western thought. But the seed was planted here, beneath this Cretan sun. The echoes travel further still. Across the sea, Egyptian scribes recorded trade with a people they called the Keftiu, the islanders of the northern sea. They described them as bringers of gold and silver, of bright pottery, of works of impossible delicacy. Their ships, sleek and swift, came bearing gifts for the pharaoh himself. Even in Egypt's hieroglyphs, you can find Minoan faces, slender, calm, elegant, bringing offerings of oil and saffron. To the Egyptians, they were guests from a land of beauty. To the later world, they would become myth. And yet, every myth carries a memory. The Keftiu became the Atlanteans, and the Atlanteans became the dream of perfection that humankind never stopped chasing. You pause before a fragment of wall, a fresco of two women facing each other, one offering a flower to the other. Their eyes meet, their expressions serene. Behind them, the background is blue, the color of sea, of sky, of eternity. It's astonishing how alive they still feel. The distance between you and them, for 1,000 years, seems to dissolve. You could almost reach out, finish the gesture they began. In that moment, you realize that the Minoans did not just influence the future, they became it. Every story of paradise, every vision of peace, every myth of golden ages and lost islands is a reflection of this world. A world where beauty was not luxury, but faith, where the divine was not distant, but woven into the fabric of life. They built the civilization not on conquest, but on rhythm, a rhythm that continues to pulse beneath history's noise. The echoes reach the poets next. Homer, when he speaks of broad-seaed Crete, lists its 100 cities, its fertile plains, its people who dance and sing. His words carry affection, respect, nostalgia. Even in his time, Crete was already ancient, already the stuff of story. Later, in Athens, Plato gives the myth its final, immortal form. Atlantis, he calls it, the great island empire, the jewel of the sea, the civilization destroyed by the gods for its pride. But listen closely, and you hear Crete breathing through every line. The sea-born power, the palaces open to light, the fall through water and fire, it is all here, only disguised. Perhaps Plato knew it. Perhaps he had heard older tales whispered by sailors and priests, fragments of the Minoans' memory that had survived like coral beneath the waves. Or perhaps the island itself spoke through him, its story too strong to die. Even now, you can trace those echoes in the language we use. To be Cretan once meant to be of the sea, agile, cunning, bright. 2. Dance with the bull became a phrase for courage, for meeting chaos with grace. And the labyrinth, that great metaphor, still twists through our imagination. We speak of life as a maze, of time as a spiral, of journeys inward and back again. Every time we say those words, we are walking once more through Knossos. Every painting that captures movement, every temple built to align with the sun, every myth of descent and return, they all hum faintly with the same rhythm. The Minoans may have fallen, but their pulse never stopped. It simply changed form, finding its way into the veins of every culture that followed. You walk out of the ruins and down toward the valley, where the cicadas sing their endless summer song. The hills glow in the late light, gold and green. The air hums with heat and scent. From here, the sea is just visible, a glint of silver beyond the trees. It looks peaceful, almost kind, as though it regrets what it took. And maybe, in its way, it remembers too. Because even the sea, that great, restless body that swallowed their world, carries traces of the Minoans still. Shards of pottery lie buried in its sand, the patterns on them softened but not erased. Every tide that rolls over Crete is an echo of the same waves that once brought the island both life and death. You reach the edge of a low hill and pause. The air is cool here, touched by the scent of the sea. The world feels vast and tender, ancient yet alive. Somewhere far below, the ruins of Knossos sleep in the twilight. Above, the stars emerge, bright, indifferent, eternal. You realize, standing there, that the story of the Minoans was never about loss. It was about transformation, the eternal rhythm of creation, destruction, and rebirth. They lived in harmony with the world, and when they vanished, they became part of it. Their art in the sea's shimmer, their prayers in the wind, their laughter in the flicker of firelight when people gather to tell old stories. The echoes of their world are everywhere. You only have to listen. The wind rises. The olive leaves whisper. The first night stars tremble in the water below. You close your eyes, and for an instant, you can hear it all again. The sound of drums, the cry of the bull, the hum of voices calling to the goddess, the rustle of silk skirts moving in rhythm with the sea. It fades, but it does not end. Because echoes never end. They only find new walls to touch, new hearts to resonate within. And so the Minoans live on, in myth, in art, in the language of beauty that we still speak, often without knowing its source. Their civilization may have fallen into the sea, but their spirit rose into the air, into the stories that have shaped us ever since. You turn toward the horizon, where the last light lingers, and whisper the truth they left behind. Nothing created in beauty is ever lost. It only changes form. The wind carries your words away, merging them with the endless rhythm of the waves. The same rhythm that began this journey, the same rhythm that will carry it onward. The sea has been quiet for 3,000 years. Waves have come and gone, winds have swept across the island, and the ruins of Knossos have slept beneath layers of dust and wildflowers. The olive trees grew old above them. Shepherds walked their flocks across buried courtyards. Farmers turned their plows through the very soil where dancers once leapt and priestesses sang. Generations passed, and the world forgot. But the land never forgets. The earth remembers every footstep, every echo, every dream that pressed itself into stone. And in the dawn of the 20th century, that memory began to breathe again. It began with a man. Arthur Evans, an English archaeologist with the mind of a scholar and the heart of a storyteller. He came to Crete in 1900, drawn by rumors, fragments of pottery inscribed with strange, unreadable signs. The locals spoke of buried palaces and ancient kings, of labyrinthine ruins and bulls carved in stone. Evans arrived curious, skeptical, but restless. He had read Plato's words about Atlantis, the Greek myths of Minos and the Minotaur, and wondered, could any of it have been real? The site near the village of Kephala called to him, a low hill covered in scrub and stones, unremarkable except for the way the earth seemed to breathe there. Something waited beneath. So he began to dig. At first, only shards appeared, bits of pottery, fragments of painted plaster, the faint outline of a wall. Then, with every passing day, more emerged: columns, stairways, corridors. The pattern grew larger, twisting and folding in ways that defied the imagination. Evans realized with a shock that he had uncovered not a fortress, but a palace, one vast and intricate, sprawling across the hillside like a living organism. Room opened into room, hallway into hallway. Storerooms filled with giant jars, pit hoy, still held the scent of ancient oil and grain. Frescoes, when brushed free of dust, revealed dolphins, lilies, dancers, and bulls. Everywhere color. Everywhere movement. It was as if the walls themselves were waking from a long dream. Evans stood among them, the dust on his hands, the Cretan sun blazing overhead, and whispered the word that would define his discovery: Knossos. As the excavation continued, the palace unfolded like a story retold. Courtyards and sanctuaries, staircases that seemed to lead nowhere, light wells that flooded the deepest chambers with gold. Evans walked its corridors for years, mapping, cataloging, restoring, until he could almost hear the echo of feet, the murmur of ancient tongues. He found no signs of war, no weapons, no defensive walls. Instead, he found art, elegant, joyous, alive. And so, in his notebooks, Evans began to form an idea. He wrote that this civilization, older than classical Greece, older even than Mycenae, must have been something different. Something gentler, freer, radiant with beauty rather than conquest. He named them Minoans, after the mythic king Minos. And just like that, the lost civilization had a name again. Imagine the scene. The year is 1901. The dig site is alive with motion, workers passing baskets of soil hand to hand, students crouched with brushes, sunlight flashing on shards of pottery. Evans moves among them, notebook in hand, his hat tilted back, eyes alight. A young archaeologist calls out, another wall uncovered, another fresco. The dust clears, and color shines through, blue dolphins leaping through the waves, their bodies painted with impossible grace. For a moment, no one speaks. The fresco is 4,000 years old, yet it looks as though it could have been painted yesterday. It is joy made visible. The joy of living, of being part of a world that celebrated movement and harmony above all. Evans smiles. The myth of the Minotaur begins to dissolve, replaced by something even more extraordinary, a civilization built on art, on grace, on reverence for the sea. But the story of rediscovery is never simple. Evans, in his wonder, rebuilt what he found, restoring the palace with bright paints, concrete walls, and tall red columns. He wanted visitors to feel what he felt, to see the place alive again. Critics would later question this, accuse him of blurring the line between archaeology and imagination. They said he had created not just a restoration, but a dream, the Minoans as he wanted them to be, peaceful, matriarchal, perfect. And yet, perhaps that was his greatest gift, because the Minoans had always existed halfway between truth and myth. Evans simply continued the tradition. He gave form to a dream that had waited too long in the dark. His reconstructions, imperfect though they were, reawakened the spirit of the island. For the first time in millennia, Knossos stood tall again, a labyrinth of light and color under the Cretan sky. News spread quickly. Photographs of the palace appeared in newspapers. Scholars flocked from across Europe to see the birthplace of civilization. Writers compared it to Atlantis. Artists found inspiration in its curves and frescoes. Visitors walked through the painted corridors in awe, hearing in their minds the music of ancient flutes, the laughter of women, the thundering of bulls. Crete, once forgotten, became a living link to humanity's earliest grace. And as Evans worked, he uncovered something even more mysterious. Tablets covered in unknown writing, hundreds of them, inscribed with strange signs pressed into clay. He called the script lineare. No one could read it. It was the voice of the Minoans, silent for 4,000 years, waiting to be understood. You stand now in one of those rooms, the light shafted through a high opening, dust motes spinning in the air. The fresco on the wall beside you shows women with curling hair, their hands raised in dance. Their eyes are bright, their lips curved. It is easy to imagine that they are smiling at Evans, at you, at everyone who came after, grateful to be remembered, to be seen again. Outside, the wind carries the scent of the sea up through the valley. The same wind that once filled the sails of Minoan ships now brushes against your skin. Evans is long gone, his notebooks worn, his theories debated. But the world he uncovered remains, glowing quietly, stubbornly, with the warmth of rediscovered memory. Each visitor who walks these halls continues the same act, brushing the dust away from the past, listening for the heartbeat beneath the stone. The rediscovery of Knossos changed more than archaeology. It changed the imagination of the modern world. Writers began to dream of lost utopias. Artists painted women crowned with snakes, men leaping over bulls, palaces open to the sun. The Minoans became symbols of what humanity might once have been, and might still become, joyful, balanced, at peace with the earth. In every way, Evans succeeded in restoring not just a sight, but a spirit. And though his restorations blur fact with fantasy, perhaps that, too, was necessary. Because the Minoans themselves blurred those same lines, living as though life and myth were one. The archaeologist did not just dig into the ground. He dug into the collective dream of humanity, and unearthed something older than memory, the longing for harmony. The wind rises. The afternoon light slants golden across the ruins. From the upper terrace, you can see the sea, still glimmering beyond the hills. You imagine Evans standing here a century ago, his boots dusty, his heart full, watching as the workers uncover another fresco, another shard of painted clay. He must have felt, as you do now, the strangeness of time folding in on itself, the living standing among the dead, the present touching the past. It is a moment when history becomes human again. You close your eyes, and for a heartbeat, you can almost hear Evans' voice. They were not lost, he might whisper. They were only waiting. The light fades. The sea turns silver. The ruins grow quiet once more. But the silence feels different now, not empty but full, as though the stones themselves are aware of being seen again. The Minoans, once buried beneath centuries of earth and myth, have been returned to the world. And though their words remain unread, their spirit speaks through color, through pattern, through the rhythm of the waves that still caress their island. The archaeologists unearth their palaces, but it is we, the listeners, the dreamers, who unearth their meaning. The past does not end. It waits, patient, beneath the dust, until someone is willing to listen. You turn to leave. The path descends through olive trees and shadow, the air cool and fragrant. Behind you, Knossos glows faintly in the dying light, red and gold against the darkening sky. It looks almost alive, as if, in rediscovery, it has begun to dream again. And as you walk down the hill, the sound of the sea returns, the same soft, eternal murmur that has carried this story from myth to ruin, from ruin to memory, and from memory back into light. The journey is not over. The island still holds secrets. Because even as the world rediscovers the Minoans, much of their truth remains hidden, sealed in their silent script, in the language of the earth itself. Evening settles over the hills of Knossos. The ruins glow faintly in the last gold of the sun, their red columns warm as blood. Shadows deepen in the courtyards, filling the ancient rooms with silence. The voices of the archaeologists have faded, their footsteps gone. The air is still. And beneath that stillness, beneath the stones and the centuries, the island still hides its secrets. No matter how deep they dug, the archaeologists never found everything. The Minoans were too subtle, too complex, their world layered not just in stone but in meaning. They built with intention, with symbols, with quiet understanding of the earth's mysteries. What Evans and those who came after uncovered was only the surface, the shell of a dream, the visible outline of something far vaster, still sleeping below. The truth of the Minoans remains half in shadow, half in light. Walk with me down the slope beyond the palace, past the fallen walls and scattered fragments of pottery, down to the low, dark places where time gathers itself like dust. The ground here feels soft beneath your feet, spongy with centuries of decay. The air smells faintly of clay and salt. You reach a small opening, a hollow carved into the earth, cool and waiting. Inside, the walls are lined with shelves of stone, and on those shelves rest rows of tablets, thin, rectangular, pressed with signs that seem to shimmer faintly in the low light. Linear A. The voice of the Minoans, frozen in clay, unread for 4,000 years. You kneel beside one of the tablets. The marks are precise, delicate, carved with care. Lines, curves, small geometric symbols that repeat and twist like patterns in a woven cloth. Archaeologists have studied them for decades, comparing, cataloging, decoding. But no one has yet broken the code. The language of the Minoans remains silent. We know what it looks like. We can hold it in our hands. But we cannot hear what it says. Was it poetry? Records of trade? Hymns to the goddess? Laws, songs, prayers? We don't know. Each tablet is like a closed mouth, a breath held for eternity. It is humbling, isn't it, to stand before a language that refuses to yield? To realize that for all our knowledge, some doors remain locked? Perhaps they meant it that way. Perhaps some truths were not meant for us, but for the gods alone. You trace a single symbol with your finger, a spiral, delicate and deliberate. It appears often in Minoan art, carved into walls, painted on pottery, etched into jewelry. It has no beginning, no end, a path forever returning to itself. The Minoans used it for everything that had no limit, the sea, the wind, the soul. Maybe this was their language too, not letters, but symbols of movement, of rhythm. Words made not to explain, but to invoke. They spoke through image, through color, through ritual. Perhaps that is why Linear A remains silent to us, because we keep trying to read what was meant to be felt. Their civilization was not built on conquest or codexes, but on resonance, with nature, with beauty, with the unseen. Their language may have been more music than speech. And how do you translate music into words? Far above you, the evening star appears, bright and pale, shimmering against the deepening blue. It shines through the broken roof of the cave, casting its light across the shelves of tablets. The marks on the clay seem to flicker like embers. For a moment, you can almost believe the tablets are alive, that they are whispering, just below the threshold of hearing. The Minoans spoke to the gods with dance, with fire, with the motion of the sea. Maybe this, too, is their language, still speaking, but not in a way we understand. You close your eyes and listen. The sound of the wind through the cave mouth deepens, and beneath it you hear something else, faint, rhythmic, like the beating of a distant drum. It could be your heart. It could be theirs. Outside, the night descends. The olive trees rustle softly in the wind. The air grows cool, carrying the smell of wet earth and the sea. You walk back toward the ruins, past the half-buried stones glowing under moonlight. The palace looks different at night, no longer a monument to human skill, but a shadow of something older. The walls breathe. The columns cast long, ghostly shapes across the courtyards. You realize how little we truly know. We have their art, their architecture, their tools. We have traces of their trade routes, their gods, their rituals. But the essence of their mind, the pulse of their thought, remains locked in silence. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know what they believed at the moment of death. We do not know what they dreamed. All we have are signs, symbols, fragments. The rest is wind. And yet, mystery is not absence. It is presence in another form. Perhaps it is better that we cannot read them. Because in that silence, the Minoans remain pure, untouched by interpretation, still alive in their own way. Each undeciphered mark is an invitation, not a barrier. It reminds us that not all knowledge can be possessed, that some truths must be approached with reverence rather than conquest. The archaeologists uncovered their palaces. We can trace their footsteps. But the Minoans still hold something of themselves back, a final secret, folded neatly into the clay, sleeping in the dark. And in that secrecy, they remain alive. Because to be mysterious is to be eternal. You climb to the upper terraces of Knossos. The moonlight lies like silver water across the stones. The air hums faintly, as though charged with memory. Below you, the island stretches out, the fields, the valleys, the far-off sea glimmering faintly in the dark. Somewhere, the waves break against the rocks with a steady, ancient rhythm. You think of all that has been uncovered, and all that never will be. You think of the archaeologists with their tools and brushes, and of the priests with their incense and songs, both, in their way, reaching for the same thing. Understanding. Connection. The moment when the past and the present touch. And you realize, that is the real meaning of discovery. It isn't about finding answers. It's about hearing the questions the past still asks us, and realizing they are our own. The wind changes. The stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere in the ruins, a loose stone shifts, echoing softly like a footstep. For a heartbeat, you feel the presence of those who walked here long before, their laughter, their prayers, their dreams suspended in the air like dust in moonlight. Perhaps they never wanted to be fully found. Perhaps what they built was not meant to be understood, but remembered. Their secrets, their language, their gods, their final days, remain where they belong, within the island, within the sea, within the living pulse of the earth that once gave them life. You breathe in, and the scent of salt fills your lungs. The wind brushes your skin like a whisper. The island does not speak in words. It speaks in silence. And silence sometimes says everything. You turn away at last, leaving the ruins behind. The path down the hill is pale beneath the moon, glowing like bone. The sound of the sea grows louder as you walk, steady and eternal. In that rhythm, you hear the truth that the Minoans knew. That every civilization, no matter how brilliant, must one day return to the elements that birthed it. Earth to earth. Stone to stone. Word to wind. But from that return comes renewal. And from renewal, remembrance. Their secrets remain buried, but their story continues. In every ripple of the sea, in every glimmer of moonlight across the hills of Crete, in every dream of lost beauty that humanity still carries. The waves sigh softly against the shore. The stars above seem to lean closer, listening. You whisper into the wind, not to ask, not to answer, but simply to join the conversation that began here thousands of years ago and has never truly stopped. The ruins of Knossos fade behind you. The sea stretches ahead, vast and luminous. And though the words of the Minoans remain sealed in clay, their meaning is already known. Because some stories are not meant to be read. They are meant to be felt. The dawn returns to Crete like a benediction. Soft, golden light spills over the hills, washing the ruins of Knossos in warmth. The red columns glow again, and the stones, cold through the long night, begin to breathe. The air smells of time and salt, of sunlight reborn. For a moment, it feels as though the island is waking once more, as if the dancers might step from the frescoes, as if the sound of flutes might drift from the courtyards, as if the sea itself is holding its breath, waiting for them to rise. But the dancers do not come. The palaces remain still. And yet, the feeling lingers, that something continues here unseen. Because the Minoans never truly vanished. They only changed form. You walk again through the palace, through light and shadow. The air is filled with dust motes, spinning like tiny galaxies in the sun. Each room holds a kind of memory, not the heavy memory of sorrow, but the soft echo of a life well lived. The hum of old laughter, the scrape of sandals on stone, the whisper of voices speaking in a language no one can read. The frescoes, though faded, are still alive with motion. The blue dolphins leap eternally. The women gather saffron forever. The bull still charges, the leaper still flies. It is as though time itself refused to take this world completely, as though beauty, once born, can never die. The Minoans may have fallen to the sea in the ash, but their spirit, their lightness, their devotion to life's rhythm, endured. It passed invisibly into the cultures that came after them, and through them, into us. Imagine, for a moment, the world without their touch. No labyrinths of thought, no myths of balance and rebirth. No sense that art might be prayer, that the divine could live in color and curve. The Minoans taught the world something we still forget, that civilization need not begin with conquest or domination. That beauty and peace are as worthy of endurance as power and pride. They were not perfect. No people ever are. But they built their world upon grace, and in doing so, they carved a possibility into the story of humanity, a glimpse of what we might be when we remember to live in harmony with the earth and with ourselves. Their palaces had no walls because their hearts did not need them. Their gods were not distant, but woven through every leaf, every flame, every breath. That is why their memory lingers so vividly. Because somewhere, deep within us, we recognize them. You walk out to the edge of the hill, where the sea spreads wide below, shimmering like glass. The wind rises soft and warm. The light catches on the water, breaking into thousands of small, golden fires. Somewhere beneath those waves lies Thera, the broken island, the crater where fire met sea and remade the world. Around it, fragments of other islands glint in the morning sun: Santorini, Anaphi, Amorgus, each a shard of a story too vast to hold. People once said that Atlantis sank. But perhaps they misunderstood. Perhaps Atlantis never sank at all. Perhaps it simply changed its skin, turning from stone to memory, from island to idea. Crete, the cradle of that idea, still stands. The waves still touch its shores, the same wind still moves through its olive trees, the same sun still gilds its hills. Atlantis is not gone. It is here, in the light, in the sea, in the way we still dream of perfection and peace. When Plato wrote of Atlantis, he called it a warning. But perhaps it was a promise instead. A promise that no matter how the world breaks, the dream of beauty will always rise again, in another place, another form, another age. Every time we build something not for dominance but for grace, every time we choose wonder over fear, we bring Atlantis a little closer to the surface. The Minoans may have vanished into the sea, but their spirit continues in every act of creation that reaches toward harmony. It lives in music, in art, in the kindness of small things, in the endless desire to understand rather than to rule. They build palaces of light. We build moments of it. The wind shifts again, carrying the scent of rosemary and sea spray. The air hums softly, and for a heartbeat, you can almost hear voices, distant, layered, echoing through time. They speak in no known language, and yet you understand. It is the sound of gratitude, of continuity. The island is alive. The sea, too, is alive. They remember. The story of the Minoans was never about destruction. It was about transformation, the eternal cycle of creation and return. The same waves that once shattered their harbors now polish their ruins smooth, carrying fragments of them across the world. Even now, on distant shores, bits of Minoan pottery wash up, small, curved pieces of red and white, their patterns faint but unmistakable. Each one a heartbeat from a vanished world. Each one a message. You walk down toward the shore. The path is narrow, bordered by wildflowers, poppies, sage, small white blossoms that catch the light. The sea grows louder as you near it, the waves slow and heavy, like the breathing of something vast. At the water's edge you stop. The horizon glows with morning. The tide creeps in, washing over your feet, warm, gentle, familiar. You close your eyes. The sound is everywhere now, the endless, patient song of the sea. It feels like an ending. But endings, the Minoans knew, are only another beginning. They taught it in their art, in their spirals, in their myths. Everything circles back. Every fall is part of a greater rhythm. So the sea that took them now carries their memory forward, in every tide, every story, every dream of lost paradise. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. Not words, but feeling, a quiet whisper that moves through the heart like a tide through sand. It says, "We were here. We danced. We lived. We loved the world, and it loved us in return. Do not mourn us. Remember what we knew. That joy and reverence are not opposites. That power and peace can exist together. That beauty, once born, never dies. These are the gifts they left us, not temples or texts, but a way of seeing." And in that way, the Minoans never fell. They only passed into the living memory of the world. You open your eyes. The sun has fully risen now, flooding the sea with light. The surface gleams like molten gold. For a moment, it feels as though the entire ocean is alive, every wave a pulse of energy, every glimmer a heartbeat. This is Atlantis, not the city beneath the water, but the idea that refuses to drown. Atlantis is every moment we look at the world with wonder. Atlantis is every act of creation that honors the earth. Atlantis is every time we remember that the divine is not above us, but within all things. Crete was never lost. It became the dream that guides us, the quiet promise that beauty will return, again and again, no matter how many times the sea rises. You stand there for a long time, watching the light move across the water. The breeze cools your face, the sand shifts beneath your feet, the waves roll in and pull away. It is peaceful, unbearably peaceful. And you realize that this stillness, this rhythm, is the closest you will ever come to hearing the language of the Minoans. It was never written in clay. It was written in wind, in salt, in sun. It was written in how they lived, without fear, without walls, in harmony with the elements that both sustained and destroyed them. That is the real secret of Atlantis. It was never about a lost city. It was about remembering how to live in balance before the world forgets again. The day brightens. The world opens. The sea shimmers with light too bright to look at. You take one last breath, deep, slow, full of salt and sunlight, and feel the island beneath you hum softly, alive as ever. The story has not ended. It has only returned to where it began. The sound of waves. The warmth of the sun. The endless, forgiving sea. Crete still stands. Atlantis never sank. It simply became us. And so, as the light deepens, as the waves rise and fall in their eternal rhythm, you let the world drift quietly into silence. And may these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams,